And now we welcome Specialist Victor Moore, who will be interviewed by our very own Because of You I Can founder, Kristen Campbell.
Okay. All right. So we are here with Specialist Victor Moore, who served in the Army National Guard for 7 years, working with the military police. And so we definitely thank you for joining us. And is there anything else you would like to say before we get into interrogating you?
I just appreciate the interest in veterans. I know that right now there's a lot of societal disruption and turmoil, and the veterans like myself, we still appreciate the fact that we're being recognized and we're still here, especially coming up on Veterans Day. And I think it's important that we understand that the veterans are just community members, and I think that's a real important thing to say right now, that we're all part of the same community and we're all trying to keep our country safe and secure and prosperous for future generations.
Yeah, that's a good point to, kind of put us all on the same level as far as we are all community members. We're all Americans, and we all have our part to do to help our country, prosper, as you say, and to come together and all that. So definitely a good point, especially right now. There's a lot going on. So and thank you so much for your time. And I'm not sure it started recording, so I'm going to introduce you one more time, and then he can flip this around.
Okay.
But this is Specialist Victor Moore, and he is here with us today, and he served in the Army National Guard for 7 years with the military police, and we're very thankful that he has taken the time out of his day to join us here. So we'll get into our first question. So let's start off with what inspired you to serve.
Well, my grandfather was in World War II. He served in the Pacific Theater with the Navy. And so he had 4 girls and a boy, and none of them went to the military. And he didn't make a big deal out of his military service. He was the guy that had like one picture of him in uniform mixed into the family pictures on the piano. And but I always felt like, that service should continue. And even as a little guy, I always wanted to wear a uniform and run around and help people, and just the whole Army police thing. And then I found out that the military had police officers, and I was pretty well hooked at that point. I that grew into kind of a secret obsession. By the time I hit 19 years old, life wasn't going perfect. I didn't really have a lot of college prospects, and my grandfather was right there in the back of my mind all the time. It's like, you know what, let's just do it. And so I went ahead and I joined the National Guard, because that way I still could have a life outside the military, but I could still understand it and train. And little did I know I would spend very little time on reserve during that time with the National Guard. So yeah, so that's kind of what got me into it.
Yeah, well, good. So can you expand on then, little did you know that you would spend so little time in the reserves. Can you tell us what that entails?
Sure. So I went into the military, actually reserve, for the reserves. So I had delayed entry. So the school date, I was trying to do what's called OSIT, one station unit training. And so they have to align where basic training will start and end at the same time military police academy will start and end. Okay. So I had a bit of a delay. I went in December of 1999 at 19 years old. I actually wound up heading to basic. I started basic training in September of 2000. And I was 20. I was the old guy in basic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, shortly thereafter, you finish basic, you report to your unit, you start doing your weekends. I remember doing annual training that first year for 2 weeks. Every year you do an annual training for 2 weeks somewhere, and it's basically just a really condensed war simulation. So you kind of get an idea of how to work together as a team and how to accomplish multitask missions that might take days instead of 20 minutes.
Right.
Excuse me. So 2011 or 2001, 9/11, 2001 happened. And all of a sudden the world flipped upside down, as anybody that was alive during that time knows. But it also flipped upside down for the military because suddenly we were thrust into a war that we had no idea how to fight.
Right.
From the insider's perspective, I was still training Soviet doctrine, which meant large tank battles, large areas. And then it became, we're going to do small unit tactics, but we don't know what that means, and we'll teach you as we go. I'm like, cool. So immediately after 9/11, I was put on as security for a terrorism task force, a joint terrorism task force in the Seattle area. They were it was partially ran out of the headquarters building for the National Guard, and so I was put on a physical security team. I was part of that task force that secured the site. So I was on active duty right after 9/11 until Christmas timeframe. And then I came off those orders, and those would have been what's called Title 32. So that was state orders. I was under state control at that point. And then the Olympics was going on. And of course, 2002 Winter Games, they're really concerned about what is this going to look like when everybody in the world shows up. They just attacked us and the whole world via the World Trade Center. Are they going to hit us again? And so they called up the military again, and we were one of the National Guard units deployed to Salt Lake City. And so again, another deployment, not doing weekends, every day wearing the uniform. So basically from September until about September of 01 to March of 02, I was in uniform every day. I was a military police officer doing my job. Came off that, and then right at the end of 2003, we were cut orders. We were called up for Iraq because May of that year we had invaded Iraq in 2002, and November we reported in for training, and we trained. So back on duty again. Trained from November till first week of Marchish. First, second week of March, 2000. That would have been 2004. So November 03 to March 04. And then I was suddenly in Kuwait. And we were in Kuwait for about 2 weeks to acclimate. And then we went into Iraq proper. And I was in Iraq from March 2004 to March 2005. So again, still wearing a uniform, supposedly National Guard.
Right.
Right. And so came off that. I stayed on for 1 month as a bailiff and a evidence custodian for our JAG officer, Judge Advocacy General, basically our attorneys, our prosecutors. And I stayed on with them for 1 month until they could process through all the soldiers that were being prosecuted for the various crimes and laws that they broke, because we do prosecute people that do wrong things in a war zone.
Right.
Came off of that in, it would have been June of 2005. And I went back to the reserve thing. I stayed on as a trainer. I did training at Yakima at Fort Lewis for National Guard members for urban combat. But that was back to the weekend. So of the whole 7 years I was in, from December 99 to December 06. So of that whole 7 years, I was really wearing a uniform probably 3.5 years.
Right.
of that National Guard time.
Right.
So, yeah. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded version, but that's kind of why it happened, and it just kept staggering out.
Yeah. So that kind of makes me wonder. So if somebody's, out there thinking about joining, whether it be, National Guard or anything like that. So if you join the National Guard, you're on reserves, but you are needed full time. Is that pretty much that's part of the understanding that, hey, even if you've got a full-time job and we need you full time here, that takes precedence over your civilian job.
Yeah, and they win. They win by force of arrest and imprisonment if you don't.
Oh, wow. Okay. So is that part of what you agree to when you sign up?
Yeah, you sign the contract that you're with them. But caveat to that, now there are hardships. If both parents are in the military, they'll only deploy one at a time to make sure that the child has care. If the single person that's in the military is primary breadwinner,
Mhm.
They bring in the money for the family, and they are in a situation where if they leave, their family would be at a severe detriment
Mhm.
in like living conditions. Like if the husband or the wife, let's go this far. Let's say the wife leaves, but she's
Mhm.
the caregiver for a husband that is, let's say, can't work.
Mhm.
There are times where those deployments would be canceled. Those orders would be canceled for those individuals, and they do have a hardship type clause that can come into play. So I don't want people to think that it's all or nothing. That
Right. Yeah.
there are exceptions. It's rare, but there are exceptions. The other thing too is they cut you federal orders. So by federal law, if you have that piece of paper, you go to your employer and say, "Hey, I just called up for Iraq for a year."
Mhm.
That employer has to hold your job at the pay rate, at the same level for promotions or anything else. When you return, you start like it's day two.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you walk right back into the job at the same level. If they do not do that, then they can get in trouble
Okay.
legally. So there are protections, but yes, the primary is the military. They own you, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
Good. So on that note, what advice would you give to anybody who is thinking of joining, whether it be reserves or, going all in?
sure. So there's three different groupings. There's what I call active duty, reserve, and National Guard. First, look at what it is you want to do. If it's a job that you're really passionate about and you really want to do it, let's take something non-combat. Let's say aircraft mechanic, because
Hmm.
that's a great skill. You learn that, you can get a job at Boeing when you get out. You're set.
Hmm.
So they'll teach you, they'll train you. But if you find something like that, you want to do it all the time, then go active. Maybe think about Air Force or Navy, uh, freight flight programs. So just basically, I would go through the different service branches and see what the jobs are that they offer, and then ask yourself, is this something that I want to do as a primary job, or is this something I want to do if my country needs me? I'll be
Hmm.
there. And that kind of starts to create the path between active duty, full life, and reserve, National Guard.
Yeah, that's
So
good. That's good advice. Good advice. So tell us a little bit about what made your service rewarding or worth the sacrifice of, the 7 years that you spent.
sure. I think the biggest reward is knowing that I did my part, I guess, and that can look a lot different for a lot of different people. I don't want people to misconstrue that to say that they aren't doing their part if they're not in the military. It's just that was my role to fill for America. We have like you, we have teachers, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have people that fill roles, and I just felt
Hmm.
like for me that was the role I was meant to fill. And then it was also time to pass that torch. Um,
Right.
but but I think the most rewarding, I don't know, I wouldn't have gotten experiences in the uh per, I can't think of the word. My outlook on the world, my view of how things are, was dramatically altered and changed in each step of my experience in the military. And I think traveling around the world, being in situations that were high stress, being in situations that were very joyous and rewarding. So getting to meet people from other cultures and learning about different people, because in a war, just because you're in a war zone doesn't mean everybody's fighting you.
Hmm.
And I make that point. I've made that point numerous times about people are people are people. And so learning about people, I think, is always rewarding, and I think it's really given me a broader scope of even what it means to just be an American. Not take for granted those little things that we have,
Hmm.
those little freedoms. I saw people in Iraq walk 3-4 hours one direction to vote for the first time in the history of their country, a real vote. We just voted. And what did we do? We ran to the grocery store and picked up some milk and some beer and maybe some snacks. And oh, yeah, there's the voting booth out back. I'll just
Right.
pop in there, do it real quick, right? And so, we take that for granted, and we don't understand the desire that many people in the world have. So I don't know, just those little perspectives on life and those perspectives on the world at large versus America, I think is um, interesting and very rewarding.
Yes, I agree. And I do know a lot about your service. We've had
Yeah,
many discussions, and we do appreciate the fact that we have those who are willing to fill that role because, as you've said, not everybody has that role to fill. We all play a different part, and I tell my students all the time there's less than 1% of our population serves in the military, and yet we have the strongest, greatest military in the world. So it's amazing that the things that we're able to accomplish with our military, and people like you who are willing to step up and take that baton, if you will, and carry that torch for us. So what would you say, just to any of the, to those who are participating in this tournament, because it is a, that combat tournament, the flight simulator combat. So
oh,
there might be some of those who are interested in, the military, just, for the excitement aspect. But would
sure.
you recommend, signing up? Is that something that, I know you said the benefits, but I guess where I'm going is, in our discussions that I've had with you before, what you did in the military, you're really hoping to kind of carry on with what you want to do in civilian life. So can you kind of explain maybe how that path, even though you are not in the military anymore, you are still using a lot of the things and hoping to serve the military even now as a civilian?
Sure. So, with this being a flight simulator tournament, the whole idea of being a pilot, um, a lot of people take that for granted because you can sit in your living room and you can build a whole cockpit and you can fly a
Mm-hmm.
plane and do all the funness. The difference for anybody that's thinking about signing up, especially if you want to be a combat pilot, because I actually know a couple. One of my instructors at Texas Tech, Colonel Lewis, is a former F-16 pilot, and he has combat time, and he's actually done what y'all are simulating. So,
Mm-hmm.
with that said, remember in real life, and I'm going to take this to a solemn note, and I'll bring it back around to a happy note. But remember, in real life, there's no reset button.
Mm-hmm.
There is no restart. If your plane is shot down and it's catastrophic, that's the end of the game in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's something to consider. Not everything's a truly a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
When you're actually doing it, it's real, and your life is on the line. My life was on the line when I deployed to Iraq, and I was well aware of that, as was my wife.
Mm-hmm.
But if you play the game correctly, you can win, and you can come out on the other side, and you can be a better person because of it, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say if you're thinking about signing up, uh, also look at what the requirements are for the job you want. For instance, if you truly want to be a pilot, since this is a flight simulation, let's stay with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you truly want to be a pilot and you love to fly, how are you at math?
Mm-hmm.
How are you at trigonometry? Do you think you could do calculus? Because most of the people that become pilots are engineers or they're mathematicians because it's a lot, a high level, highbrow level mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
um, physics, all those kind of high level science and math because that's what you're doing.
Right.
You're working within physics and mathematics to run an intercept pattern on a moving target, right? So with that, if you're not great at math, maybe you change your goal and you say, well, I still love airplanes and I would love to be a jet engine mechanic. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you still get to be on the flight line. You still get to be involved in the pilots. You still make sure that plane is in the best condition possible for the guy that's going to go out there and use it, right? Because it's just a big tool. That's all a plane is a huge tool. So, there's different ways to keep in the game, which takes it back to me. So I was a military police officer. I loved the investigation. I loved using my mind. I like to study and examine and observe. And all those skills came naturally to me, but they were highly enhanced by my time in law enforcement with the military, and also my time in combat, which takes you to a different level because you start to evaluate not really criminality but survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start to mesh those two, it's like, well, how can I use these skills? And so for me now, what I'm looking at is trying to become an analyst in the corporate or in the actual federal government,
Mm-hmm.
but in the role of a defense, and using my mind and those tools, that toolbox that I've got of observation and critical thinking and abstract thinking, and taking that and trying to then keep America safe and still fill my role. Going back to the original thought of filling a role, I still feel like that's my role, but I had to pause it, and I had to go back to school, and I had to go, write some papers and prove that I actually was as nerdy as I am, and then hopefully someone will reward me with a job. So, it's all about short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And if you can find something that aligns for all three, then you won't have to do what I did and take that pause and reassess. You can just keep stepping forward. So that if you're going to join the military, think about those midterm and long-term goals and how you can take that job and maybe translate it. And if it doesn't translate, then is this something you just want to do for a little while and then you'll do something different later? And that's okay too, but just be aware of that.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for, that's great advice. And, your experience definitely speaks to how the military has influenced you and shaped your views. And, from what I know of you, your military experience is something that you value, you cherish, and you wouldn't change for the world. So we definitely are appreciative of your service and for your time today. And we hope that this tournament goes well. And do you have any last minute things to say to those who are participating?
Best of luck.
Awesome.
Hope you're able to win it. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty, thank you to all those who've tuned in to this veteran stream today. We hope you enjoyed that interview. I know I certainly did. And again, thank you to Specialist Victor Moore for both his service and taking time out of his day to conduct that interview. And we'd also like to thank our Because of You I Can founder, Kristen Campbell, for that interview as well. Now, in 10 minutes, currently we're going to go and take a break, and in 10 minutes, we're going to interview Lieutenant General Wendy Masiello and her husband, Major General Thomas Masiello. So that's going to be another excellent interview, as they all are. So go ahead and be sure to tune back in 10 minutes.
So cool.
All right, we are ready to start our interview with General Wendy Masiello and her husband, Major General Tom Masiello. I'll start with General Wendy Masiello introducing her. She graduated from the ROTC program at Texas Tech University and was the first in her immediate family to join the military. Throughout her 36 years serving in the Air Force, her primary job was to fly biplanes, satellites, and missiles used by our nation's warfighter. But she also commanded an Air Force base in California and lived and worked in Iraq and Afghanistan for 6 months, supporting the soldiers and Marines during Operation Enduring Freedom. Her husband, Major General Tom Masiello, grew up in New York and graduated from the Air Force Academy and began his service as a fighter pilot, and then continued as a test pilot, where he conducted developmental tests of new airplanes and weapon systems to ensure they performed the way they were designed to perform before they were sent to the front lines. He served 1 year in Iraq and ended his 35-year career as the commander of the Air Force Research Lab. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for participating in this interview and giving our tournament goers something to latch on to as far as what military is all about and service, and giving us a chance to honor you for your service. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kristen. We're glad to be here.
Definitely.
All right, so we'll just start off with our first question, and you guys can kind of tag team or decide who wants to go first or second or whatever. So let's just start off with what inspired both of you to serve? What kind of drove that desire to join the military?
Go ahead, Wendy.
So what inspired me to serve was I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, and I loved Lubbock, Texas. But my grandparents were in Chicago, Illinois. I had lived in Oklahoma and Kansas prior to that. And while I loved Lubbock, Texas, I knew there was this kind of big world out there, and I really was interested in exploring and understanding what that was. And the Air Force was a great opportunity to learn more about our big world by living in different locations. But the bigger part of joining the service was I really liked the idea of being part of something bigger than myself. And the United States Air Force really offered that opportunity to me, and I kind of grabbed onto that because I wanted to see what that was. What was that all about, and how and where could I make a difference?
Good.
I'll say for me, honestly, I grew up in a very, when you say New York, people automatically think New York City. Actually, it was a very small town in Western New York. And there was not a big at all military community there. My dad did serve in the Army during World War II. He fought in the South Pacific, but it's not like we were a military family by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he rarely talked about it. What initially got me honestly interested in joining the military was for an education. Had an opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy. I just knew it was a great education. But just being there and serving and really getting immersed in the culture, it's just impossible not to be motivated to serve and carry on with a career in the military.
That's great. So Wendy, you decided to serve. Was it your goal to serve to join as a career? Whereas Tom said, he was thinking kind of more as an education and maybe not necessarily a career.
No, actually not at all, Kristen. My initial commitment was for 4 years, and I thought 4 years and out. I really wanted the experience. I thought that would be enough. One thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure I could earn a living, and I could do that on my own. And the military gave me that opportunity to prove that I knew how and could take care of myself.
Oh, for sure.
Remember, I graduated way back in 1980 from college. And women were just starting to break out as, major employees for our nation. And but at the end of that 4 years, it was like, I kind of like this. And the Air Force kept giving me better opportunities every time I turned around. So every time I was at a point where I could make a decision to do something different, to leave, there was something really awesome hanging in front of me that I just didn't want to let go of. And so I just kept on going for 36 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very good. And so, Tom, you never had any second guesses about, making a career out of it once you what kind of really made you decide, okay, more than an education, this is a career?
Well, so went to the Air Force Academy, went to college, and then went off to pilot training.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, flying airplanes, it was fun.
Oh, I
And just
can
part
imagine.
of the squadron, and it really did not seem like a job at all. And just
Right.
love the esprit de corps,
Mhm.
love flying, and initially, even at graduation, I didn't think I was going to be 20-year career. A
Mhm.
lot like Wendy, well, let's just see how it works out. And
Mhm.
as each opportunity presented itself, I said, yeah, I'd like to go do that. And just next thing you know, it was 35 years later.
Right, right. Well, that's awesome. I mean, 36 years, 35 years service, that is quite the career, especially in something that, requires quite a bit of sacrifice at times. So can you tell us a little bit about what that sacrifice looked like? What was maybe the hardest thing with regard to serving, maybe the biggest challenge?
I think many people in the service struggle mostly with the moves, because military service does require moves. A lot of people are under the misconception that that doesn't happen in corporate America, but that happens in corporate America too. But it is hard, because not only are you moving a lot, but especially many of the flying community, the pilots, those who are in that environment, and even with our conflicts that we've been participating in for years, you're away from your home and your family a lot.
Mhm.
And that, for the military member out doing their job, that's kind of part of their job. For the family members that are left behind now, taking care of kids,
Mhm.
having their own jobs, being away from immediate family members and moms and dads, and that core support system, living in other countries or remote areas of our nation. And those are always challenges for the community. And that's hard for a lot of members, just being away from families and people being gone all the time. But when you go in with your eyes wide open,
Right.
that's part of the adjustment. And I think it's really important. And when you make that decision to become a part of the military, that is kind of part of the reality that comes along with it. And so it's important to think about that and make deliberate decisions when you choose that lifestyle.
Right, right.
And I think, Wendy hit the nail on the head in terms of the biggest sacrifice is time away from family.
Mhm.
And then if you grew up in the same town like I did, well, you're not going to be able to see your mom and dad and the rest of your siblings like you would if you stayed there. But I will also tell you, everybody's in the same boat.
Mhm.
So when you're gone, and there's no doubt about it, especially in this sort of ops rhythm, people are gone a lot. They're deployed overseas and they leave their family behind. But what's nice about the military, what's specifically about the Air Force, but all the services, that there is a support system for the family back home. All your whole social circle is kind of in the same situation, and so folks look out for each other. There are structures to make sure the families are taken care of. So it is a sacrifice. You are gone, but it's not like the families are just forgotten about. It's just not like that.
Right, right.
People look out for each other.
Kristen, Tom and I didn't get married until I was 38. So I was single for a really long time when I was in the military. And Tom's comments about the military being a family in its own right are just so true. Everywhere I went, my family became my military brothers and sisters, and the people that I worked with on a day in and day out basis. And he's so true that they took care of me as a single person, just in the same way they take care of the family members when their military member is out of town or gone.
Yeah. And that is something that I've heard over the years with doing our Warrior Project with our students and interviewing and talking to many military members, that, that is your family. It's not that you forget your family at home, but, that becomes your family, and you need that, especially in, like you were saying, the conflicts and all that we're seeing ourselves in, or have seen ourselves in the last, many years. So, all right. So on that note, let's take it to more of a positive note, as far as, challenges or what's difficult. What makes it most rewarding? In other words, and you can kind of take this two ways, what's most rewarding about your service, or what makes that sacrifice of, your time in the military worth it?
You start this time.
I think at the end of the day, it's all about the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the relationships and the friends you make, and it starts with the mission, and everybody is focused on accomplishing that mission, whatever it is. With Wendy buying satellites, or the first part of my career, I was stationed in Europe during the Cold War, and where there's still a Soviet Union, and you train to really provide a deterrent effect so that you're going to prevent war, and everyone's focused on that mission, and it's very rewarding at the end of the day as you accomplish those missions.
For me, Kristen, this is the thing that I loved is I had the opportunity in the acquisition environment. We were buying technology that was going to contribute to the defense of the United States.
Right.
Or it was going to help other people and other nations realize their future.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it very personally because I was charged to manage the money that came from Congress to spend that. And I took it seriously. When I was asked to make sure I was paying the right price, I was going to make sure I was going to pay the right price, because in the end, it was all of us taxpayers paying that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it really seriously that's what I was there to do. And my challenge was to do the very best job, because I wanted my dollars to go as far as they possibly could, for your sake, for my sake, for my kids' sake, for the future of our nation, and for global peace. If we can get to that point, just getting to that point.
Right.
And it's amazing when you think about what it is that you are responsible for each and every day, that what I give in terms of tools or weapon systems to the pilots, to the satellite drivers, to the leaders who need good command and control when they're in tough conflicts and tough environments, making sure they have the best capability there is what's going to make sure that we have that future.
Right. Well, and I can imagine.
I have to say, she doesn't have that same philosophy with our checkbook.
I wonder, that was kind of going to be a follow-up question eventually.
I appreciate that.
What pressure to be in charge of so much, money from the military, and from the government. And then, I can't imagine the pressure there. But then the follow-up question was going to be, how has your service maybe changed you, affected you, benefited you? And, apparently there is a benefit for that. And but
the benefit wasn't there, but that's okay.
Not for you. Not for your checkbook.
It's funny that you say that. When you look at peers that come out of colleges and universities, a lot of times your military membership doesn't really bring in the cash that some of those programs are going to do, especially when you move up in rank and you watch what your peers are making. But in the end, you look back on the things and the opportunities that you've had, and the decisions you've had to make, and it's all worth it. In the end, it's okay. It's okay to have not been there, but
well, you look at that, and I think we all have a place to fill, and we're Americans, and we have a role, and when everybody contributes and plays their part, that's what the beauty of our country is. And so I still find it shocking. And then when I do this unit with my kids every year, they are surprised that, less than 1% of our country serves. And yet, you look at what we're able to accomplish with our military, and, the strength of it and all. And I think, that says a lot, of course, about our military, but also about our country as a whole. So, that is shocking that, 1%, less than 1% is able to do what, you guys have done.
You know what I will say a huge benefit is for the commensurate amount of an equivalent job in the civilian world, you have levels of responsibility right off the bat. Even like take a pilot, within 2 years, you're the aircraft commander versus you go into the civilian airline industry. It'll take years before you're the captain. And it flows down to everything in terms of even I work for Northrop Grumman, and I'm in the defense industry, the corporate world. Before individuals get a chance to manage people, to be supervisors, it takes years after college. Where military, you're supervising on day one, depending on what career field you go in. And then you're junior enlisted, it might go from high school right into the military, but within a couple of years, again, they're supervising other high school kids. It's amazing. And so it teaches you leadership skills. It teaches you just levels of responsibility, that how important it is that if you're not going to get anything done unless you take care of your folks and you get everyone aligned towards a mission. And so even if you just serve 4 or 5 years, you're going to come with such an amazing skill set that can be applied anywhere across our economy.
Right.
So, Kristen, I'll just piggyback on Tom's experience. I didn't have the squadron experience, but in acquisition, in the business side of the military, within 2 years of working in the acquisition environment, I was managing a $2 billion program.
Oh, wow.
$2 billion
Amazing.
As a very young officer. And my peers were still figuring out life. And when you demonstrate your capability in the military service, because there aren't very many, like you said, 1% of people ever have that experience, they are so grateful that you're there that they throw opportunities at you as soon as you demonstrate that you're interested and that you're capable. And it's fabulous to be trusted like that in a way you never expected.
Right. And I can imagine, what that does for, anybody, having that level of trust and support and responsibility, what that does for your self-esteem, what that does for you going forward, regardless, like Tom was saying, whether you stick with the military or not, those are character traits and things that you adopt that you may not be able to get in the civilian world, or it takes, a lot longer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, what would you say, and this kind of is building on what we're talking about, but what would you say to somebody who might be on the fence about joining?
I think military service is always a personal decision. You shouldn't make that decision because somebody else tells you should do it. It's a calling. Military service is something you should want to do, whether it's for a short period of time or for it's a career or a lifetime. It's hard work. It's a lot of responsibility, but if you're not afraid of challenges, if you're not afraid to try something new, if you want to test your mettle, it's a great place to do that. And so many people don't understand how quickly that can happen for them in a military environment. And it's changing so rapidly that if you like the idea of change, this is a great because it's always changing. And if you're good with change, it's a great way to really excel because people sometimes are challenged by that. We have to constantly be reassessing what we're doing. We have to constantly be improving our capabilities. We have to always be thinking ahead. And this military environment is a great place to practice those kinds of skills, problem-solving skills quickly, rapidly, and looking to the future to help inform it and make it better each time.
I would say also, if you're on the fence, just going back to where I was in high school and not really been around anyone that was in the military, what I knew about the military was watching MASH. You know, it had a stereotype of and thinking, I don't want to go in, and you can't sleep in, you get yelled at. but so just talk to people that are in the military, talk to people close to your age group, really understand what you're getting into versus just the stereotypes or what you've heard and rumors, and don't be afraid based on what you watch on TV, I guess. Right. is what I'm saying. You try to get as informed as you can.
Right.
But don't be afraid of it, honestly, especially if you're on the fence.
Right. Well, that, to me, the idea of change, the idea of growth, the idea of opportunity, and how it can benefit you if you decide not to do the career out of it. Right. It's an amazing opportunity for so many different avenues that you could explore, especially, the military looks for what, where your strengths are and builds on that and puts you where it's not like you go in, right, and they just say, okay, this is what you're doing, and you don't really have any choices. So,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Well, let's wrap this up with anything else you would like to say to our tournament participants, anything you want to leave them with before we end our interview.
Kristen, I'll just say this. I'm super excited about the tournament that's being hosted. What a great opportunity to test your skills, your motor skills, your understanding, your problem-solving skills, and your hand-eye coordination. Is that pretty cool? And for our fighter pilots or any pilot in today's environment. But when you think about where technology is evolving in our Air Force, or even as you look to the new Space Force, there are so many opportunities to take the skills that you've learned in these types of games, these gaming skills, and apply those in our today's military environments. Where you are each and every day sitting there doing that simulation, that's what our future is in the military, taking those skills from an artificial intelligence perspective and learning, applying those in whether they're UAVs or communicating with satellites, or even moving tanks across the road. It's amazing what and where our technology is going. And you guys are right smack in the middle of it. To take those skills and move them into the military, whether it's Air Force or any other military service, you're on the cutting edge. And to be able to do that is pretty amazing. So thanks for being interested in this. And thanks for supporting the military concept and ideas, and the men and women who have served before and still are serving our great nation. Thanks.
So just to piggyback on Wendy, I would say kind of from an American way of war, the way America looks at the military, one of the tenets is we are going to use technology to the max extent possible to help our service members in harm's way. That doesn't mean you won't go in harm's way. That doesn't mean you may or may not be in danger, if you will. But America is committed to fielding the most advanced technology to keep you as safe as possible on the battlefield. And so that means conducting leading edge technology that you cannot really have access to almost anywhere else in the country. It's just a way of life within the Air Force and now the Space Force. So if you enjoy technology, I mean, just in terms of the group here and in the tournament they're doing, obviously that's part of what they like, and automation and that sort of thing. It could be very, very rewarding for people that are technology inclined.
Great. Well, we want to thank you so much for your time today. And more importantly, thank you for your service, 35 and 36 years of service to our country. We truly appreciate the service and sacrifice and everything you do to help us maintain our freedoms and the things that we enjoy here that oftentimes we take for granted. So we're glad that we get this opportunity to hear from you about your experiences and that we get to say thank you. So thank you for joining.
Kristen, thanks
for what you do for the program for your young people. I really appreciate that, Kristen.
Thank you
on that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
What another incredible interview. There were some incredible stories and experiences to share that interview, and I hope that everybody enjoyed that interview as much as I did. And again, thank you to Ms. Masiello and Mr. Masiello for taking time out of their day to take part in that interview. We also thank Kristen Campbell for conducting that interview, as well as playing a big role in organizing the tournaments and interviews. Like last time, the next interview will be in 10 minutes, so be sure to stay tuned.
All right, so we are here today with Staff Sergeant Omar Hernandez and Sergeant Kalea McFadden. We're very happy that they decided to join us for the interviews during this tournament. So welcome to both of you.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, we're so glad to have you. I'm going to introduce each one of you, and then we'll get into learning a little bit more about you and your service. So Staff Sergeant Omar Hernandez joined the Army National Guard on April 1st, 1999, and served in Fort Sam Houston following the 9/11 attacks. He assisted our Border Patrol and the U.S. Marshals, trained soldiers, sailors, and airmen deploying to Iraq, and was deployed to Iraq for 2 tours. He received over 25 military awards and recognition over his 21 years of service. Sergeant Kalea McFadden served in the U.S. Army Reserves from June 2007 to June 2018. She served at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and Fort Lee, Virginia as a supply sergeant in infantry support, and she served as the battalion S3 NCO for an instructor unit in Lubbock, Texas. Sergeant McFadden served 1 tour in Iraq as detainee operations and corrections at Camp Cropper Iraqi Prison with the 89th MP Brigade. Over her 11-year career in the U.S. Army Reserves, she received over 20 military awards and recognitions. So thank you so much for both of you, your service for both of you, and happy Veterans Day on this day. We are actually doing this interview on
It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time today as well. All right, so we're going to get right into the interview questions. I guess we'll kind of start with what made you decide to serve, what inspired you to serve. Each of you can decide who wants to go first, and just tell us a little bit about what was the impetus to your serving.
So for me, it was to just do something for myself. And of course, I was a mom at the time. I had a 2-year-old little boy. And I felt that this would be a great opportunity to better myself as a woman, as a human being, as a mom, as a role model, and as a provider. So, and it just sounded like something that I felt like I could do at the time.
Yeah. So was anybody else in your family, had anybody else served, previously? Was there, or were you the first one?
So my grandfather on my mother's side served in World War II with the Army, but he had passed away when I was 2 years old. So there was no military influence in my life. Right. So in a way, I'm kind of the first, but at the same time, I'm not.
Yeah. Did you have any reservations, having a young child? Because, you typically kind of see that's a choice that a lot of people make right out of high school or out of college or before family. And I've had some interviews with people who've decided after they've, made a life in a different direction and then decided to go this direction. So was there anything that made you maybe have some reservations about that?
Just leaving him behind was probably the biggest reservation because, you're, as a mom, you're literally with him from birth. And just being apart from him was the hardest part. And he was also my motivation, so I had to keep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm doing this for him. I'm doing this for us.
Right. And so how did he respond? I know he was quite young when you entered, but as he grew, what was his response to your serving?
He didn't like it when I went away, especially when I deployed. He thought that every time I put the uniform on, he thought that I was leaving again. So that, so there were some scary moments for him, but now that he's 16, he is more appreciative and he's very proud of my service, and it has motivated him to want to join the military himself.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to hear. All right, thank you. So Omar, what about you? Your impetus or your inspiration for serving?
Well, before graduating high school, in my junior year, my cousin, he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting into the Army. Do you want to go?" I was like, "What are you talking about getting into the Army? We're not done with school yet." So I was like, "You know what? Yeah, let's go ahead and do it." So we both went through boot camp and our training and stuff, but a lot of it had to do with my cousin
Mhm.
mentioning it and then hyping me up, But
Right.
I don't regret that at all. It's been pretty good the last 21 years.
Yeah. Yeah, because you made a career out of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so did your cousin have any sort of, reasoning? Was there any particular reason why he decided to join and then quote unquote drag you along?
Well, he was in ROTC
Okay.
since middle school.
Oh, wow.
As soon as he can get into ROTC, he was in.
Mhm.
And then his path was trying to get into the Army. So Estacado had offered the Army Junior ROTC program, so that's where he went, and from there he was all Army.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did he make a career out of it as well?
No, after I think about 10 years, he called it quits. And that was after our second deployment to Iraq. He was like, "You know what? I've had enough of this, and I'm getting out." But I still stayed in. So
Yeah, and what made you continue and make it a career?
well, I figured that at 10 years, I'm halfway there, and to retire, you have to get 20 years. So I was like, "Oh, should I throw this all away
Right.
or continue on?" So I was like, "You know what? Heck with it. I'll reenlist." So I raised my right hand up again, and I said, "I'll do it again for another 6 years," and kept on going. I did 6 years, then 2 years, and then 4 years. And with 21 years of service, and now I'm retired.
Retired. Yeah. So how's that going? What are you doing now with your retirement?
A whole bunch of nothing.
He's growing out his beard.
Beard. Yes, I like it. I like it.
Yeah. No, I picked up on woodworking, so I make little woodworking little deals and stuff. And it keeps my mind busy. It keeps me busy. I've been a busybody, so I can't stay still for a long period of time. And it's also, I have time to spend with my wife, with son, for holidays, where whenever I was in, our training always fell on a holiday or on a weekend that we were planning to do something. So now I don't have to worry about that. Now being retired it's good.
Yeah, oh, I bet. I'm glad you're enjoying that. So tell me about the dynamics of being married and serving. How did that affect you? What was how did you make this work? What effect did that have on you as a couple?
Well, in the beginning, when we were dating, we were in the same unit, and we were both professionals. So as soon as the uniform went on, we knew how to be professionals as service members in the same company, and no one knew for the first 6 months that we were even dating. That's how well we did. Really well. We just maintained our military bearing, our professionalism, and kept it like that. And then when we got married, I was in a different unit at that point. So the only difficult parts were when we had separate drill weekends. Now we're different units. We would drill on different weekends. So there went 2 weekends out of the whole month that, we couldn't see each other or do anything or schedule anything. Double the annual trainings in the summer.
Yeah, there was a time where she had her training for 2 weeks.
No, I was gone for a month.
for a month. I'm sorry, she was gone for a month. She'd come home, and right when she come home the next day, I'm gone,
Oh
Yeah.
my.
and
Was
then I'm off for 2 weeks.
Is that just the way it fell, or is that just kind of
Yeah,
okay? Because I know
Yeah.
it's a situation in the Army where if both parents are serving, they kind of work it out where one parent can be home with the children if there's children, or
That normally works if you're active duty.
Okay.
When you're serving, but when you're both serving active duty and you do have a child, and say both of you get called up for deployment or some sort of training, that yes, there's ways to work that out. Unfortunately, with us being reservists, we sort of, you sort of get the short end of the stick,
Right.
and we just kind of have to make it work.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, so kind of building on, the years of service, what did you find to be the most rewarding? Because I kind of, we talked about the challenges here with, being gone and not being, home at the same time. So what would you then say would be the most rewarding about serving?
I would say for me, it would be a sense of self. Just finding my place, helping me grow as a person, as a leader, as a mom. Because even in the Army, I kind of took on that mom role, and I liked to take care of those under me, like the newly enlisted soldiers. At one point, I wanted to be a drill sergeant to make better soldiers. So I think the sense of self for me was probably one of the most rewarding aspects of being able to serve, especially as a woman, because this is still relatively new for, the history of our military.
Right. And so what would you say, I mean, if this is a flight simulator tournament, and, again, you're typically looking at more of a male interest in all of that. So, if we happen to have any participants who are female, what would you say to them about serving, if they're thinking about it or, considering that as a possibility?
Go for it. Because they can't tell you no just because you're female. If this is something you have a passion for and you can see yourself doing, then go for it.
And what about the places for women to serve? I mean, I know they can pretty much do whatever, but what do you see as being, a woman signing up? Where do you see them serving? Where do you see their roles typically happening? What does that look like?
Obviously, earlier, it used to be more specific jobs that only females were allowed to enlist into. Now they're allowing females in infantry, more combat roles.
When the combat roles were predominantly male, now they're starting to integrate the females. So I mean, like what Katie said, the infantry, they were going through Ranger School, which was predominantly male, and Special Forces schools. So if you put your mind to it, you can do anything.
That's awesome, and we're definitely making strides with that. So glad to see that that is something that our military is working on, and that you've been a part of, Kaylee. Awesome. All right, so Omar, what about you? The most rewarding part of your service?
I would have to say meeting new people, the camaraderie that is instilled. Whenever we would go out to different bases, it was like part of the family. Even though you didn't get to meet that person or know that person well, you had like respect for that person, and there was some sort of camaraderie there that was not written. It's one of the unwritten rules, about being in the military, no matter what branch you are in. you can see a veteran and you can go up to them and start talking to them, and you just had all kinds of things in common, which was amazing. Like today, like today, we went to HEB, we were talking to veterans,
a Navy vet and a Marine veteran out of
just nowhere.
Yeah, in the middle of the like drink aisle.
Right.
And
can you guys just pick each other out? And you just kind of say, that's a better, yeah.
Well, I noticed the caps.
Oh, okay.
They were wearing caps, so when I see the caps, and of course when they look older than me, I immediately will go and thank them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without even saying anything about myself.
Yeah.
But one of the gentlemen just assumed, and he was like, "Thank you for yours," and I was like,
what?
I mean, I didn't have a shirt on or anything.
Right.
That spoke military, but I don't know. So somehow he knew.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always look at the hats.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because especially with like our World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veterans, they got the least amount of thanks,
right,
compared to Omar and myself.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And that's how it started.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and family, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, just that whole, you know, that's what kind of has been a resounding theme through all these interviews is, you know, that is one of the biggest rewards is, yes, you're leaving family behind and that's hard, but your family is there with you serving as well. And that becomes, you know, your rock and what you depend on too. So
how we met.
Yeah, there you go. So there can be love in the,
yes,
you can find it. So that's awesome. Very good. So I would kind of try to wrap up here with what you hope for the future of our country, our military. What are your thoughts with that? Kind of the direction we're taking. What are your hopes and all that for our country as a whole and for the military specifically?
Country as a whole, I hope you know, unity. You know, people come together, support one another. Not everybody is perfect, so I mean, don't treat them like they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody has their flaws, or everybody makes mistakes. Just treat them as equals. You know, that's how I think that our country would be better, is if we treat each other as equals more than, well, you know, I do all this and you don't do all this, so I'm better than you. You know, it just doesn't jive with us.
Yeah.
You know, treat them the way that you want to be treated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely agree with Omar as far as the unity part of it. I would love to see it more unified,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, people coming together, getting along, but serving with a purpose.
Yeah.
I hope that the generations after me and those considering joining, they serve with a purpose. You know, that they're doing this because this is something they want to do, and they want to, you know, not only make themselves better as an individual and as a team, you know, learning that teamwork environment, but also just for our country, because especially the state that our country is in right now, we could use all the love we can possibly get.
Agreed.
So.
Agreed. So on that note, I just want to build on that. So for somebody who, you know, in this tournament, again, there are actually, I'm sure, people who are serving, are actually pilots and serving, you know, playing in this tournament. But then there are those who are just the hardcore gamers, and they just love it as the game. And so that's why they're participating. For those that aren't considering serving or haven't served or are not, you know, talk about their role as, you know, citizens, as Americans, because, you know, one of the things that, as I do our warrior unit with our kids every year, that I stress is that, you know, it's less than 1% that serve in the military. So, you know, we are not all called to be, you know, called up to the service, but yet we all are called to serve. So what would you say about, you know, the roles that we all can play aside from serving in the military?
Civilian support is super important. Those of us who have served, we respect, the right of this country to not make people serve in the military. Like we respect that decision, that if you choose not to serve, that's okay. Because there are those few of us that will do it. But as we've seen in wars, the support from home is definitely important. So just, if you don't want to serve, it's okay. It doesn't make us better than you, and you're not any better than we are. You keep living your life and you keep doing what you want to do, and keep being a good person.
Yeah.
And just when we have to go and do things that our nation demands of us, because that is our job, then just support us. That's all. That's all we ask, is just that that moral support from home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give a thanks every now and then if you see a veteran, have like the World War I, World War II hats, the Vietnam veteran hats. They wear them because they're proud of what they did, and proud to have served their country. So I would say give those guys a thanks, a handshake, or the elbow, elbow
Right.
touch,
The hat tip.
the hat
There
tip.
you Yeah.
Nod.
Because they've been through hell and back.
Yeah.
Right.
Even us that I went to Iraq, been through hell and back. Even Desert Storm, that was crappy work. So I mean, if you have a chance, you see somebody with a hat on that has some sort of veteran tag on it, just give them a thanks, a hat tip, elbow, something, And trust me, we really appreciate that type of support too,
Yeah.
So.
Well, then here is our thank you. Thank you so much for your service.
Yeah.
We do appreciate it. And, with our foundation, our goal is to honor that service and to teach our kids, our youth today, the importance of recognizing that our freedom is not free. It comes at a high price, and that there are actual people paying that price for us, and they deserve our thanks and our honor. So thank you so much for your service and for your time today. And
Thank you for thinking of us.
Oh, of course. And we hope you have a great rest of your evening on this Veterans Day, and take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What an outstanding interview. It was great to hear both of their experiences and especially their advice for those who look into serving. And again, we'd like to thank Staff Sergeant Omar Hernandez and Sergeant Kayla McFadden for both their service and taking time out of their day to do that interview. As always, huge thanks to Kristen Campbell for playing such a major role in organizing these interviews and helping with the tournament. The next interview will be in 5 minutes, so be sure to check back then for our next interview.
Okay, so we are here with Master at Arms Third Class Peyton Oldham, and we're very thankful that he took the time out of his day to join us for this interview during this tournament. So thank you, Peyton, for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm going to tell our listeners a little bit about you, and then we'll get into answering or asking you some questions.
Okay.
All right. So Master at Arms Third Class Peyton Oldham joined the Navy in 2011 as a Master at Arms, where he was assigned to Coastal Riverine Squadron 4, a small boat security squadron providing security for U.S. ships as they traveled in and out of port in the Persian Gulf. He did 1 deployment to Spain and Kuwait, 1 deployment to Dubai, and 1 deployment to Fujairah and Kuwait. He separated as a Master at Arms Third Class in 2015. All right. So I guess just looking at all of your service and the things that you were involved with, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to serve?
So I did JROTC at Lubbock High for high school, and that built a pretty strong relationship, at least on the Navy side, just kind of going through that program. And then it just kind of seemed the Navy fit some of the needs of what I wanted to do. I'd always known I wanted to serve. My grandfather was in World War II in the Army. And so there was always at least some connection to wanting to do my part.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of so fell that the Navy's where I ended up.
Yeah, very good. Well, and the fact that you say, do my part, because, one of the things that as I teach our warrior unit to our students every year, one of the things that still blows me away and surprises the kids is that less than 1% of our population serves. So, serving in the military is not, doing your part for everybody. It's for that small group of those who choose to do so. What would you say would be, something that those who choose not to serve or don't feel like they're called up to serve, what would their part look like, just as a civilian?
Well, I think it's fair to be able to have that self-reflection and understand that it's not for them. I mean, the military is definitely not meant for everyone, and not everyone's meant for the military. So to understand that that's not a detractor on them personally, and it's not meant to look at them in a negative light, that there's a certain set of people who are suited for it. But it's also one of those that even if you don't feel like it's your calling, and you feel like maybe you don't know where you want to go in life, it's a good way to get your feet on the ground and get you a transitional period between going from being in with your family to actually learning how to be on your own.
Yeah.
But it's still not a detractor. Like if that's not your calling, that's fine. Being a good steward in other ways is still a respectable calling. So it's not a detractor one way or the other, and it doesn't set you apart. It's just different strokes for a different set of people.
Yeah. So we all have our roles for sure. I totally agree. So what would you say then would be, actually, could you just tell us a little bit about what you did in the military? That's interesting. The security for ships going in and out. Could you tell us what that looked like, or a day in the life of what you did?
Yeah. So we were what's considered a little bit different than the conventional Navy. The Coastal Riverine Squadron comes from the Vietnam patrol boat riverine units from Vietnam, and patrolling up the Mekong and doing escorts like that. So essentially, in Dubai, which was our busiest deployment, we were on day shift, but we would get up about midnight and we would essentially take watch at around 3 a.m. We would do boat checks, and then we would go and we would stand static security on any boats that were in port that were refueling.
Mhm.
That could be anything from oil tankers, U.S. oil tankers, to aircraft carriers, submarines, and anything in between. And we would stand security on them, and then we would either escort them out or pick them up X number of miles out in sea,
Mhm.
and essentially provide a security platform for them as they're coming in and out of port.
Oh, very good. That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't known of anything, like that situation as far as serving in the Army or in the Navy like that. So what would you say would be the most challenging part of serving? Or, it could be serving in general and being away, or just that job in itself?
I think probably being away is a difficult part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but just being able to find a unit that you fit with, that's a cohesive fit.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone from every part of the country, and even some other countries. So it's just learning to take everything with a grain of salt, and that there almost always are better days ahead, no matter how hard it gets.
That's a great attitude. Definitely a great attitude. So to build on your idea of, the military could be for you or may not necessarily be for you, I liked what you said about, it kind of teaches you or gets you ready, or is a good transition from being at home to being out on your own. So building on that, what would you say is, are the biggest lessons or that you learned, or how did serving change you as a person?
It definitely taught me to be more self-reliant. It kind of throws you into the fire in that sense of you're forced to learn how to be self-reliant, and it also forces you to learn how to work as a team, and to take people from all different walks of life and push them to work towards a specific goal, which to some extent is lost in average life. So that was a big positive. A lot of it definitely aged me. I felt like I had a step up, at least with some of my peers coming back. I knew that I'd been able to experience a little bit more life than some that have never left their hometown or anything like that. I just got to see a different side of the world and get a more well-rounded perspective on life and how much we take it for granted in some cases.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I was going to go then with that is, what did it make you appreciate more, having served? What were some things that maybe you realized you took for granted?
I would probably say just the time that we have with family. My grandfather was 95 when I went in, so the time that spent with him after was incredibly important. And then just how good we have it compared to some of the other countries. I mean, when we were the taxi drivers essentially that we hired to take us to and from the compound were making like $15 a month, and they were still sending money back to their families in Pakistan. So it's just understanding how good we have it versus some of the other nations. We essentially create our own problems versus actually having something to complain about that's based in reality.
Yeah, that's a great point, for sure. Creating more problems for ourselves by not realizing, the freedoms we have, the privileges, and yeah, I can definitely see that too. So on that note, what do you hope for the future of our country? What would you want to see here in the near future with regard to, maybe it could be related to the military, it could be more related to just, our country as a whole?
I think a shift from the fringes is probably the most important thing right now. A shift from, be that right or left, ideologies. The fringe is where we start to detract from what makes us a nation. I think once we can start to realize that we have more in common on wherever we're from, or whatever political ideology we come from, that we have more in common than we don't. And to realize that once we stop making things harder on ourselves, we can actually start to work together. I think that's really the biggest issue that we have right now, is that we're just not able to see opposing arguments from another perspective. We're so stuck in the ego side of everything that we're not able to allow ourselves to even look at a different perspective. And I think that's a big detractor from our experience. As
finding that middle ground.
So I think the middle ground is really where we need to focus on shifting back to.
Yeah, agreed. So about your service, is there anything that you would do differently, as far as maybe choices you made, or, how did you, get into the job that you had, with, providing this security? And is there anything you would have done differently if you could?
Had I had the foresight, I probably either would have continued doing the Master at Arms, but when I had everyone has the opportunity to at least try to get into the working dog program and through the Navy in Master at Arms A school. And so at least trying to get into that area, I somewhat wish I would have done that, or specifically just gone and tried to do intelligence. I looked at it. I didn't look at it in the long term. I looked at it as, what can I do that'll get me in there, and I can do that. But I didn't look at where that would take me down the future paths. Had I done that, there would be more opportunities open for me now than just the specific military police route, which I'm not upset about where the path has taken me at all. It's just if I would have looked at it from a different perspective, I may have potentially set myself up a little better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess, in any situation, no matter military or civilian life, I think we can all look back on, some choices we've made and realize that about ourselves too. So, that's a good point. Definitely. All right. So to kind of wrap this up, what would you say makes your service worth the sacrifice of, that time with family and all of that? What is it about your service that is worth the sacrifice, or what is it about our country, or, what makes it worth it?
Just to know that I was able to do my part to whatever extent that it was. Understanding that we each have a role to fill, and that it is, at least in my mind, it's part of our civic duty to give back in some way. And so this was one of my ways where now I've followed through that with trying to work with the honor flight and do some of the other projects I'm involved with, but being able to represent America in the best way that I could while in uniform I mean, that is what made it worth it. It wasn't for the free meals on Veterans Day or anything like that.
Right.
Just to know that when I had the opportunity to give back for everything that I have, that I was able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for those of us who don't serve, and I'm sure you'll agree, there's plenty of ways, and because you still continue to do so with serving with Honor Flight, but there are so many ways to do our part and to give back and to honor the freedoms that we're given, and, just the country that we live in, and all of the privileges that we have that we really don't realize we have. We all, I agree, have a civic duty to do so and have opportunities to do so. So thank you so much for doing your part and for your time here today. Is there anything you would like to say to any of these participants? They are participating in this flight simulator tournament. And so is there anything you would like to say to them as we sign off?
Just good luck, and thank you for doing everything to raise money for y'all's organization, and I hope that it goes well.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that as well. Again, thank you so much, Peyton, for your time, and we will hopefully talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, another moving and incredible interview. There's definitely a lot to learn from that interview. And again, thank you to Master at Arms, Third Class, Peyton Oldham, for his service and taking time out of his day to conduct that interview. It is very cool to hear from somebody who has such a unique role in the Navy. And again, special thanks to Kristen Campbell for helping to organize this event and orchestrating the interviews. Now, the next interview will be in 5 minutes, so be sure to check back in. And for you DCS and pilot enthusiasts, you'll want to stick around for this one. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Major General Thomas Masiello. Over the course of his career, Masiello was a test pilot who obtained over 3,300 flight hours in planes such as the F-111F, F-15A and C model, the F-15E, and all blocks of the F-16 at the time, as well as many more. Not only did he fly, but he held numerous administration positions, such as the head of Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patt, U.S. CENTCOM Command, and many more, as you'll hear in this interview. Without further ado, we welcome Major General Thomas Masiello. We are here with Major General Thomas Masiello, so I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself because he probably knows a lot more. He does know a lot more than me, so go ahead. If you just want to give us a brief interview of your Air Force career, how you got commissioned, just a quick brief of what it was like.
Yeah, will do. So I spent 35 years in the Air Force. I retired in 2016. Grew up in a very small town in Western New York, and ended up going to the Air Force Academy after graduating from high school. Just to be honest with you, I really wasn't something that I was pursuing as I was growing up. My dad did serve in the military, but I wouldn't consider us a military family. He actually served in the Army during World War II. But again, the military growing up wasn't something that was necessarily on my mind. Really, I went there mainly because of the education. And then, just going there obviously motivates you to want to serve. So I did go to the Air Force Academy. I was commissioned in 1981. And following graduation, I went to pilot training. Pilot training lasted about a year. And my first assignment out of pilot training was flying F-111s, the Aardvark, out of Lakenheath, England. And so essentially my career, the first couple assignments were flying F-111s operationally. Then I went to test pilot school, and within the Air Force, once you go to test pilot school, it's out at Edwards Air Force Base. It's mainly focused on the developmental testing of new airplanes and new weapon systems, and then any kind of upgrades to existing aircraft. And I bounced around between the two main test bases that are Edwards in California and Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida. Anyway, did that and then led to some science and technology assignments. I was assigned to an AFRL location down at Eglin doing munitions research, and then various Pentagon staff assignments overseas to include Iraq. I spent a year there. I spent 18 months in the country of Qatar, again in the Middle East. And then my last assignment, I was commander of Air Force Research Lab that's headquartered in Dayton, Ohio, and then retired. And then now I work for Northrop Grumman. So that's kind of a quick background on my career, Jackson.
Yes, sir. That seems like it never was a dull moment, and that sounds like. So, if we could start from the beginning, what was your experience with UPT? What base was it at? Did you expect to get fighters straight out? Is that really what you were shooting for, or was it just you were going to be happy with whatever they gave you?
Okay, so right. So where I went to UPT, undergraduate pilot training, it was at Williams Air Force Base. It was in Phoenix, and just outside Phoenix. And of all the pilot training bases, that by far had the reputation for being the best location. Obviously, being outside of a major metropolitan area, and so my number one priority, I wanted to get to Williams, or Willie, which what we called it. And obviously, starting pilot training, I did want fighters. My initial goal, though, was, okay, I just want to make it through. I want to get my wings. And at the end of the day, I'd be happy with any airplane. But once I kind of got into it and just really enjoyed, especially flying the T-38, I absolutely wanted to get a fighter out of pilot training. And back in those days, it's just when the F-15 and F-16 production lines were cranking up, and so 15s and 16s were coming down the pike. I actually went on an F-15, ended up getting an F-111, and I am so glad I got that airplane. It was an amazing platform. Again, I flew it for 2 tours, and just the mission, which was you fly low, you fly fast, you drop bombs. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. And my best friends today are from my very first assignment flying F-111s in England.
Yeah, that's amazing. The F-111 definitely is a cool plane and definitely had a pretty large purpose for a very long time. So you said your first assignment was in Lakenheath. So could you give us a brief description of what you did there, what your job was, and what you do with the F-111 there?
Yeah, so what's interesting, even before I got to England, so I got assigned F-111s. You graduate from pilot training. And pilot training, if you get a fighter, you go to what's called LIFT, Lead-In Fighter Training. And that was at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And that was just lasted like 3 months. And you just learn the fighter fundamentals. You fly the T-38, the same airplane that you flew in pilot training, but it actually had a gun sight on it. You carried some practice bombs. And so you got to do some air-to-air training. You got to do some air-to-ground training. Again, just some quick fundamentals. So when you go to your fighter platform, at least you've been exposed to that. And then for F-111, it was called RTU, Replacement Training Unit. So where I first learned to fly the F-111 was Cannon Air Force Base there in Clovis, New Mexico, not too far from Lubbock. And in fact, we would go to Lubbock to go to the mall, just to go to some civilization. It was still a couple hour drive.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you can imagine Clovis is really out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But a great place to fly the 111. I mean, the 111 is loud. You need a lot of training area to fly low level. You need weapons range, and all that was real close to Cannon. And then on to Lakenheath. And Lakenheath, so when I showed up at Lakenheath, it was the Cold War. We trained every day to fight the Soviet Union.
Wow.
We would have to take tests on what we call visual recognition of all their aircraft. So they'd flash up this blurry looking airplane for 10 seconds, and then you'd have to take a test on what it was so that you can recognize it when you're flying. Was it a MiG-23 or was it a MiG-25 Foxbat? Those sort of things. Mm-hmm. It was all about fighting the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. I mean, that's why we existed. They had, at the time, so many more, their troop strengths and their armor and tanks, they dwarfed NATO. And really what was the counterbalance to their large standing army was air power. And so if air power was going to stop, if the Soviet Union ever decided to advance into Western Europe, a big part of stopping them was going to be air power. So our bases were all camouflaged. We had sandbags. It really blew me away going over there that I wouldn't call it a war zone because you just go off base and it wasn't that big a deal. But our bases were camouflaged. Again, there's sandbags everywhere. We would train about every 6 weeks with our chemical warfare gear on. It was a different attitude. People just don't understand what it was like during the Cold War, and you had the Soviet Union and nuclear weapons. We sat nuclear alert. And so it was a very, very interesting time. I'll tell you also, just being a second lieutenant in a fighter squadron, your only real responsibility was being a snack bar officer, besides learning to fly the airplane, the threats. But your additional duty was you were the snack bar officer.
Mm-hmm.
And you better not run out of coffee in the morning or beer on a Friday night. And other than that, you're fine.
Yeah. Yep. So for flying the F-111 in Lakenheath, did you have any role in Operation El Dorado. I know that appeared to be a different squadron, but did you do any strike planning or anything like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it was all the squadrons. So we had, at Lakenheath, we had 3 operational squadrons and 1 training squadron. And what's interesting, I did train, and I was at one time one of the crews that was scheduled to go on Operation El Dorado Canyon, but I was actually, I had progressed. You know, you show up, you're just a wingman, then you become a flight lead, then you become a 4-ship flight lead, and then you become an IP. During that first assignment, I have worked my all the way up to instructor pilot, and I actually got transferred into the training squadron when new people and train new people, they're coming in. So I turns out I was not part of the actual strike. It bummed me out. It still bums me out. I would have loved to have been part of it, but it was just one of those things.
Yep, definitely. So after that, you said you went to TPS, the test pilot school. So just whenever you joined the Air Force, was that something you kind of had, or in UPT, was there any time you're particularly shooting for TPS or wanted to be a test pilot, or was it just something that they said, hey, here's an opportunity, and you took it?
Well, for test pilot school, I'll tell you what motivated me. I didn't really even think about TPS that much when I first got the pilot training or was flying. But then I had talked to a friend of mine who had applied and talked to him about it and learned more about it, then did research, and I go, this sounds great for me, because I had an engineering degree, an electrical engineering degree out of the Air Force Academy, and what going to test pilot school allowed was, you know, I loved flying and I liked engineering, and so it was a combination of both. You get to basically exercise both those disciplines, and that's why I applied. And I will tell you, it was.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, test pilot school was by far the hardest course I have ever taken, bar none. Much harder than anything in college, much harder than pilot training. I also went to fighter weapons school, and I mean, that was a tough course, but TPS was something you really had to work at. It was very challenging.
Yeah, definitely. So, out of TPS, were there any particular planes that you enjoyed testing or experimenting with? Were you involved with the 16 and the 15 at some point?
Yeah. Well, after I graduated, I actually went to Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida, near Fort Walton Beach. I had the option either to stay at Edwards or go to Eglin. And at Edwards, there wasn't any new airplanes coming, basically there to have an opportunity to fly. But at Eglin was all the weapon testing. So and there were all new precision guided munitions coming out. And what's interesting about doing developmental testing at Eglin, in which I loved, is when they put new weapons on airplanes, you had to go out and certify that the handling characteristics aren't affected such that a new pilot would have problems flying the airplane. For example, like an F-111, there would be flutter on the wing. Same thing on the F-16. If you got to certain parts of the envelope, your airplane wings would flutter essentially, and if it got too bad, it can either structurally damage the airplane or you just couldn't control it. And you would take the airplane to the limits of where the flutter would be either approaching again, and they're all instrumented, and you have people in control rooms, so they're monitoring the stresses on the airframe and on the wing. So you're really not the people in the control room are worried about that. What you're concerned about, a pilot in the airplane, is, can I control the airplane? Are we going to lose control? Can you continue the mission? Basically, from a brand new second lieutenant's point of view. And then you would actually set the flight limits of the weapons configured in this way on an aircraft, and I really, really liked that part of the flying. And so and then you also were dropping brand new weapons, firing missiles at drones. It was just a lot of fun too.
Yeah, definitely. And for our viewers, there's a good video on YouTube if you would like to look it up about what a TPS does. There's a video of a 16. They tested asymmetrical loading and found that the flight system or the FLICUS in it could not handle that. And there's actually part of that video is an F-16 departing, which was pretty violent in F-16. But if anybody wants to get a good overview at what a test pilot does or what a test is like, that's a great video to look up as well. So moving on from there, going back to the F-111, I still have one more question about that. Were you still in the airframe at the time they equipped it with the FLIR? I think it's the paved track, I think is what it was called.
It's a PAC. Yeah, so when my first assignment, so there were 4 variants of the F-111 in the U.S. Air Force. The A model, the D model, which was at Cannon, the E model, which was up at Hayford in England, and then the F model, which was at Lakenheath in England as well. And that's the model I flew, was the F model. And the F model took kind of the F-111 had a very troubled development, and especially there was just so many brand new state-of-the-art capabilities that they try to integrate all at once. It actually had the first airplane with a HUD. It was the first operational airplane with a plane following radar. Obviously, it had swept wings. And then it was the first aircraft to try to integrate, rather than have round dials and analog dials, you'd have a digital display and digital avionics. And they had this is from the 60s, so there were a lot of problems. But eventually, the F model, which was the last aircraft off the line, they kind of fixed it. They kind of got it working the way it should be, and it had the bigger engines in it too, or the more powerful engines. And so the paved tack was integrated onto the F-111F, and when I showed up, they had just got that integration complete. The entire fleet was modified with the paved tack, which was the forward-looking infrared integrated with a laser so that you can drop the laser-guided bombs.
Yep, seems like that was definitely the guinea pig for a lot of things in the Air Force at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So, moving on. Says you had experience in both the 15A and the 15E. So definitely 2 very conflicting communities there, at least the light gray versus the dark gray. So just could you sum up, what your experiences was with the 15 single seat versus the Strike Eagle, and what the differences were, and just what you liked about each aircraft?
Yeah, so after pilot training, like I said, I went to England, after test pilot school. So when I got to after TPS, the whole idea is you get to fly. They trained you to fly multiple airframes. And when I got to England, the first airplane they checked me out was in the F-15. Actually, it was the C model, which is the same as the A. It's just an upgrade. Yeah. We had A's and C's, which are single seat light gray F-15s, like you said. And that airframe is purely designed for air superiority. It doesn't carry bombs. It's all about air-to-air missiles. And so the testing at England, when I would fly the A or the C, it was about either doing captive carry of new missiles, and the AMRAAM, the AIM-120, was being in development while I was there, and so did a lot of AIM-120, and that's a radar air-to-air missile, and did a lot of the development, launched a lot of AMRAAM missiles during weapons separation testing. And so that's the main focus of the A. But I also got to fly the E model too, which was a 2-seat, obviously, as you know, 2-seat strike version. And what I really enjoyed, that essentially the Strike Eagle has the same mission as the F-111.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enjoyed doing that. Was mostly air-to-ground weapons testing off the Strike Eagle. And then we also had F-111s there too. So I really kind of was triple qualified in the F-15A or C, F-15E, and the F-111.
Wow.
So it was a very cool assignment.
Wow, yes, it's pretty cool, especially testing the AMRAAM. So moving on, so what did you do after Eglin? Did you go to did you go to staff college, or did you get another assignment, or what happened from there?
Yeah, so after Eglin, I went to staff college, Air Command and Staff College. It was at Montgomery, Alabama, at Maxwell Air Force Base. You spend a year, and that's now it takes you completely out of the flying environment, and it's an academic environment. And really, the focus is on learning strategy and kind of the operational level of war, of planning. Up to this point, when you're in a fighter squadron or test pilot school, really it's about the tactical execution, the day-to-day execution. You go to Air Command and Staff College, now they're trying to turn you into more of a strategist and understanding how to apply air power more at the operational level versus at the tactical level.
Gotcha. Yeah. Alrighty. So after staff college, what assignment did you get after that? Was that when you got the 16 or?
Well, actually, I went
first
to the
assignment?
Pentagon. But I got to do staff.
Okay.
I went to the Pentagon. I was working. Went there 2 years, and just a standard staff job in the Pentagon. And really, what most of the focus on the Pentagon and on the air staff on with each of the services, really, it's amazing how much is focused really on the budget and planning how much funding the service will get for different areas. And my area was the F-16. I was called the F-16 Program Element Monitor. And my job was to ensure the F-16 for upgrades and those sort of things got a proper amount of funding, and then help justify it within the Air Force, within the Office of Secretary of Defense, OSD, and with Congress. So it was an interesting assignment, to say the least. It was my first, non-flying assignment other than going to school. So it took a little bit of an adjustment, but it turns out I actually enjoyed that kind of work. And then following that, I got assigned back to Eglin flying F-16s.
Wow. Yeah, definitely seems like Pentagon something maybe not as glorious as flying, but it's definitely necessary. So when you went back to Eglin flying the sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a great way to put it.
Yep. And so flying the 16, were you qualified in all of what you fly any particular models or blocks, or was it just kind of the general overview of 16s at the time, or what was it like for the 16 at Eglin?
So at Eglin, again, we're at a test unit, so we had all the blocks. We had A models, A, B, C, and D, and block 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And we had block 42, 52s, and those are just different engines. And so we had every single model of F-16 just because you needed them all due to the different testing and the different characteristics of each of the different models. So it was a little bit of challenge going out and strapping in and okay, what are the limits? What are the ops limits on this A model versus the C? But you kind of got used to it. And they all flew the same essentially. And the F-16 is a dual role, so it was both air-to-air and air-to-ground. So we did a lot of both, like I said, air-to-air testing and air-to-ground. It was interesting at that time, the UK, the Brits were developing what they call an ASRAAM missile, and it was a new IR-guided missile. And they actually contracted with us at Eglin to do the development work. So did a lot of ASRAAM work for the Brits to include firing a lot of ASRAAM missiles. So again, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. So out of all the 6 scenes, is there a particular block that you like the most, or would be suited that was maybe one that was lighter than the others, so a little faster GE engines that you liked, or anything like that?
So there's no doubt about it. So you had the Block 50, which were GE engines, and the Block 52s, which were Pratt engines. Those are the most powerful. Those engines were unbelievably powerful compared to the original engines in it. But to me, either the Block 50 or the Block 52. I mean, there were some guys that that were GE guys or Pratt guys. It didn't matter to me. Both those airplanes were just really amazing, and it's just incredible how much power and how much energy those engines put out, and what you can do with that airplane compared to earlier variants.
Yep, definitely. And for our DCS listeners, the Block 50 is actually the one that is in DCS, so that was pretty cool to hear about that one. Alrighty, so moving on from Eglin. So Eglin, that was when you were the 16th experimental test pilot. So after that, did you get another assignment, or was it back to college and education for you?
So after that, So then I went to what's called Industrial College of the Armed Forces. It's like a war college. It's a war college equivalent, but more acquisition focused, and that was at Washington, D.C. at Fort McNair. That was another year-long program. And then when I graduated from that, then I went right back to Eglin as the squadron commander of the same squadron that I had just left.
Wow.
It was a little different. They combined 2 squadrons into one, but then I became the squadron commander there. And as a squadron commander, you're doing less test flying, really. It's more leadership. And what's interesting there, also, I as part of the squadron, I had 400 maintenance folks. And so now you're going from up to that point, maybe I supervised or led 20 people. Went from that to now I have over, counting everybody, almost 500 folks. And so it was quite a challenge, and it was really, that was about once you get up to that level in squadron commander, it's about leadership. It's not about your flying skills anymore.
Definitely. Yep. So back at Eglin, so I guess just go ahead and continue on the line. After being the squadron commander, what happened after that? Were you stay there, get assigned to a... Sorry, go ahead.
I just did it for a year because I got promoted to colonel. And once you get promoted, and got promoted early, it's like, okay, you need to go to a colonel's assignment, and that's not a squadron commander. So just after a year, maybe it was 18 months, I stayed there at Eglin, but completely changed to a different organization. That's when I went to Air Force Research Lab, and it's called the Munitions Directorate. That's where they do all the research for weapons. So they do explosives research, they do fusing research, they do guidance research, automatic target recognition, seekers. It's the whole gamut of anything on a weapon, both air to air and air to ground. The research is done there. And so I went there to lead the lab, and that was a fantastic assignment. I loved that.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really exciting. So continue on the line. So at that point, you were a colonel, so still moving up, which is always exciting. So after that, which I guess was around the 9/11 time period, so I guess that's when everybody started transitioning over to the post 9/11 doctrine and kind of out of the Cold War fighting Soviets and more into the Middle Eastern conflicts.
Actually, that occurred. I mean, in terms of the Middle Eastern focus, that occurred more when the wall 90s? Fell down in 90, and then we storm. So, what changed the focus after 9/11 is more the global war on terror. That GWAT is called. So we kind of focused that changed the focus to more of a terrorist fight.
Mhm. Yeah. So after doing Eglin research, where'd you go after that?
So after that, I became a wing commander. It was at a classified test unit, and that's about all I could say on there.
Okay. Yep. Alrighty. So after that, which seems pretty exciting, what happened? Where'd you go after that, being a wing commander?
So after that, so now I have to go back so I went to a headquarters assignment, and this time I went to what's called a major command. I went to Air Force Material Command. It's based at Wright Pat. So all of the logistics, the research laboratory, and all the program offices that acquire weapon systems, that is all under Air Force Material Command. And I went to the headquarters to be the Inspector General, which was kind of an interesting assignment. I just ended up doing that for 18 months. And what the Inspector General's overall responsibility is two responsibilities. One, they conduct the high-level inspections of all the bases to make sure they're following the right rules and procedures. You know, at the end of the day, nobody wants the IG to show up because we're grading your unit, we're grading their homework, but it's a very important process.
Yep.
Just to make sure, you know, from a compliance standpoint, units are they know the rules and are following the rules essentially. And then also another aspect is just to do investigations when people make complaints of fraud, waste, abuse, abuse of authority, those sort of things. We would run the investigations. So at the end of the day, no one likes the IG, to tell you the truth, but it was very interesting. It was a necessary, sure.
Yep. Definitely.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, then I said after that, my career kind of took a turn in a different direction as when I went to Qatar for 18 months. So Central Command, CENTCOM, they are the COCOM, what's called the combatant command that was fighting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're headquartered in Tampa, Florida, but their forward headquarters was in Doha, Qatar, and I went to the forward headquarters and spent 18 months there.
Wow. CENTCOM sounds pretty important, especially during that time period. So after that, I guess, which at that point, once you reached MacDill, were you still colonel, or were you at that point, did you get promoted? Did you get the star, or what happened in that time period?
So I was still colonel. Now I had been notified that I got promoted, that I made 1 star, but it took over 18, 19 months to pin on. And so my entire CENTCOM assignment, I was a colonel.
Okay.
And then was assigned to the Joint Staff.
Wow.
Back in Washington, D.C., in the Pentagon. And while I was there, I got promoted to 1 star.
Wow. Yep. That's really cool, working for Joint Staff. So after that, I guess that was at the Pentagon, correct? If you're in Joint Staff.
Yeah, so the Joint Staff I was down was called the National Military Command Center, and basically that monitors basically what's going on in the world 24/7. Again, really, really important job. Got great insight to what's going all over the world. Did that for about 18 months and then got assigned to Iraq. Went to Baghdad, spent a year over there. I was assigned to the embassy, and my job was called Director of Strategic Effects, and that means kind of under my purview, I had everything that did not involve kinetics to help us win the war. So it wasn't involved in the shooting aspect of it. It was more focused on
winning the people over.
What will win?
I guess that was a huge thing.
Yeah, election. Finance, all those sort of things from a military point of view of how we can support that. And obviously the biggest responsibility was focusing on the elections. And I was working with Iraq, working with the UN and the Iraqi Commission for Elections and just basically working it from an angle of how can the U.S. military support what they're doing.
Wow,
Very,
yeah.
very loved it.
Yeah, definitely rebuilding Iraq. That would be quite the challenge. So after that, after being doing strategic effects or being over in Iraq, after that, where'd you go? What was the continuation of after that?
And very interesting assignment. I got assigned to the State Department for about 18 months, but that was completely different track. I never thought in a million years I'd end up at State Department. I was actually held over there. I worked in the Paul Mill Bureau, and part of my portfolio included landmine cleanup. It included what's called foreign military financing. It was an amazing assignment for somebody who'd spent all their time in the Department of Defense to go to state and see how they operate and get a chance just to do something different. I absolutely loved it. And again, it was way out of my comfort zone, but it was interesting and a lot of levels of responsibility and kind of embraced.
Yeah, definitely seems always interesting to do something new. So after that, which is incredible, it's a quite exciting career. After that, where'd you go after that?
So after State Department, I went back to the Pentagon. I was in the Office of Secretary of Defense, and my position was called Director of Special Programs. And that position has oversight of all the black programs across all the services in the military. Again, unbelievably very, very, very interesting assignment. And then just having insight to all those sort of programs that I never knew existed, it was kind of cool.
Yeah. So I guess after that, it's getting kind of close to the I guess getting kind of close. I guess what time was that? Was that in the 2010 or late 2000s?
Yeah. So that OSD assignment was 2011 to 13, 2 years, and then my final assignment, I left the Pentagon and went to Wright-Patt in Dayton, Ohio, as commander of Air Force Research Lab, and that was a great way to cap off my career.
Yeah, definitely. So at that point, I guess that's when you, before or during that assignment, is that when you got your, I guess probably before is when you got your second star?
Yeah, I got my second star in the Pentagon as Director of Special Programs.
Okay, wow. That's incredible. So after that, you retired, correct, after that Wright-Patt assignment?
Yep. So did 3 years there, retired out of Wright-Patt. My wife, Wendy, she was actually a 3-star at the time, stationed at Fort Lee in Virginia. So I just went down and just lived with her there at Fort Lee. I did consulting, and then a couple of years, then I went on to DARPA. I did DARPA for a couple of years, both consultant and as a government person, and then went on to Northrop in 2018.
Wow. That is an exciting career path. That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service. It was great getting to talk to you and great getting to talk to somebody who is a test pilot and has a lot of experience in the Air Force. So I guess just closing remarks would be anything you would like people to know, anything that you think you would want to tell people about the Air Force or just about your career path or life.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, thanks, Jackson. Thank you for all you do. I mean, you're an incredible young man, and I can't tell you how much my wife and I appreciate what you're doing, and really think you're doing great stuff for the country. I guess I would just, I really enjoyed my military service. I never thought in a million years when I signed up to go to the Air Force Academy that I'd served 35 years, plus 4, if you count the Air Force, that's 39 years. It went by so fast. I mean, I loved it. If I can give advice to anybody, even if you're not really sure just talk to folks, talk to people you trust to kind of get an idea, because there's so many stereotypes and misconceptions about it, what in the Air Force, that you try to get a firsthand account. And then if you're on the fence, don't hesitate to give it a shot. Again, I absolutely loved it, and I would encourage anyone to at least give it a shot if they're thinking about it.
Yes, sir. Yep, definitely. So I think that's it. So thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for taking time out of your day to talk to me. I guess that is it.
Okay. Hey, Jackson. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you so much.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye now.
What an outstanding interview. Personally, I know that I gained a lot of knowledge from General Masiello's stories and advice. I hope that those who are watching enjoyed that interview and gained insight to what being a test pilot is like, or what a 35-year-long career in the Air Force looks like. I cannot express enough thanks to General Thomas Masiello for taking time out of his day for that interview and for his long service to the United States. Now with that, the next interview will be in 5 minutes, so be sure to keep tuning in.
All right, so we are live here with Colonel Rich Menhard, and we are excited to have him here to tell us a little bit about his service and, kind of what it meant to him and his impact or how it impacted his life. And so I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then we will get into some questions.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm Colonel Rich Menhard. I spent 29 years in the U.S. Army, originally from Pennsylvania. Spent the majority of my career in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and served multiple tours of combat in Afghanistan and Iraq, and also the Horn of Africa. I retired in 2016 after brigade command, and I now live in just south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and work for a company called Titan Technologies.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we are so glad you're here and grateful that you took some time out of your day to be with us. And so let's just kind of start off with, the typical question of what inspired you to serve? What caused you to make the decision to sign up?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty much through family. My father served in Vietnam. My grandfather served in the war. I spent a lot of time as a kid with my grandfather. And my grandfather was, really my inspiration why I joined the Army. He actually parachuted into D-Day with the 82nd Airborne Division. So that's the reason I joined. I became an infantryman right away in the 82nd Airborne Division. Ended up spending 7 years of my career in the 82nd as an infantry officer before moving on to do other things. So that was really the driving force why I joined the Army.
Well, very good. Well, I know Jackson, the one who's organizing this tournament, has been greatly influenced by his grandfather, just like you were. So you guys definitely have that in common. So building on that, what was maybe your favorite part of serving? You started as an infantryman, and then you moved into other jobs in your 26 years. So what do you look back on as being the one that something that sticks out about your service?
I think it was the 13 plus years in Special Operations Command for me. It was really the highlight of my career. I went from being a captain to a colonel in Special Operations Command. So that's really where I deployed 8 times in that same stretch. And it was really the men and women in that group of that unit that really were the key, why I stayed in the Army, why I enjoyed it, because of the people.
Yes, well, and that's something that I hear from many of many veterans is it's the people that basically become your family that you're surrounded with that really makes serving.
Very much. That's why people fight for their men and women on my left and right. It's definitely what you're there for, is the men you serve and women you serve with.
So what made it most challenging? What would you say was the most challenging part of serving?
I think the only challenging thing is the balance between the military and family life. So being away from your mom and dad and your wife and your kids and your family, your brothers and your brothers. And for me, I don't have any sisters, so my brothers. It's just being away from family. So, spending 29 years in the Army, by the time you retire, your families, especially my mom and dad were old, and you can't get that time back. So that's the most challenging thing, just the time away. For me, at least from my perspective, is the time with my family. Yeah.
So was your family supportive of your service and signing up? And, how did they respond to your decision to serve and then, basically throughout your service?
Oh, yeah, my family supported me the whole time. From my grandfather until he passed away, through my mom and dad and all my siblings. And so and my entire family, even my extended uncles, aunts, cousins, everybody supported me. So no, it's never a support issue. It's just really a time and a way issue.
Yeah. So if somebody is, considering joining, what advice would you give them? How would you, especially if they're coming from a family who hasn't served, so they're unaware of the sacrifices and everything that's involved. What kind of advice would you give them if they're considering this and how to approach that with family?
I think it's, it's something you have to go into knowing you're going to be away. But I mean, a lot of jobs are away. I see this today now. I'm in the civilian world, but a lot of people travel a ton for their civilian jobs, especially salespeople and that. So you're going to be away, and so people that adjust and make the military career are able who can manage living away from family. And so, and then really the Army becomes their second family, and the people they serve with, and then you get home as much as you can, and you live like that. So my advice to them is, it'll be the greatest experience you've ever had if you really take on that challenge. No matter what service you take on, the people you meet will live with you the rest of your life. You'll know them forever.
Very true. Well, good. So on that note, the people you serve with, is there anything in particular that you learned from either, serving with other people, maybe a lesson or something that kind of sticks out at you with somebody that you served with or served under, maybe something that you learned that has stuck with you?
I mean, you learn something from everybody you serve with, whether it's about leadership, whether it's about how to deal with people. I think the biggest thing I learned as a young officer is you can't treat everybody the same. Certain things motivate people to work harder. Yelling and screaming at people never is effective in my life. I never found that effective. But it's how you handle people to get the most out of them. And I had a really good leader when I was a young lieutenant who taught me that it's how you look at people, assess them, understand their strong points and their weak points, and then emphasize their strong points and then work on their weak points. And so, I think that was the biggest thing that affected me was making sure you get the most out of everybody you serve with, especially when you go to combat, because who you have is who you have. Yeah, and if you don't get the most out of them, that's your own fault, really. So
that's a great point. And we've talked, I've done this warrior unit with my students for almost 10 years now. And, just knowing that less than 1% of our population serves, you are absolutely true. Who you have is who you have, and you have to be able to rely on them. And another thing, kind of looking at the stigma of, or the movies and, kind of what you think of boot camp and how your superiors treat you and address you. It's interesting that you say that, what you learned was that you can't treat everybody the same. Because kind of what I see is the boot camp of the yelling and in your face, and is that the way it always is, or just the idea that maybe it isn't, because I think that might cause some people to be hesitant about signing up. But from your experience and what you're saying, it seems as if you have those type of leaders that really know how to get the most out of who they're serving with, and maybe it's not all about that.
No, it's not at all. The Army has changed. I mean, it's more, what you find today is our soldiers are more educated than ever. So a lot of and they're not all coming in right out of high school. So a lot of them, I had many of soldiers, and a lot of them you met through the hunts, who went to college first and then just decided they took the wrong major. And they realized that wasn't what they wanted to do with their lives, so they joined the Army. So, I mean, as a battalion commander in Iraq, my driver was 36 years old, who was a police officer, and then just made a decision at 34 that he was going to come in the Army, and actually had to get a waiver to get in at that age.
Really?
At that time. Yeah, and he just wanted to join. And now he's a registered nurse. He served his 4 years. He went to combat twice. Unfortunately, he was wounded when I was wounded. And he got out and he went to nursing school, and now he's a registered nurse. And so he's doing great. And he didn't make it a career, and not everybody is. I mean, 1% serve, and it's like a 0.03 actually retire from the military. Yeah. It's very unbelievably small. So I never knew I was going to spend 29 years in the military when I started this road. I really think you start down the path, and if you enjoy it and it's what you like, you will stay. If it ain't, you take that experience and you build it into whatever you want it to be in your life. But I think anybody would find out it'll be the best 4, 6, or whatever years you spend. You'll look back on it and be glad you did it.
Yeah. So you didn't join intending to spend 29 years and retire. What were your thoughts when you first joined?
I wanted to be with my grandfather. I wanted to jump out of airplanes and be an infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division. That was as far as I went. I just and seriously, and then after I got in, I decided I want to be a commissioned officer. So I had to get out to go to college to come back in. I didn't, because I didn't have college before. I didn't have any college credits. I went straight out of high school in. So I actually left the Army, got into ROTC, went to a 4-year college, graduated, went straight back in as a commissioned officer. So, and most of the guys, to be honest with you, when I started as an infantryman, there was 38 lieutenants. They were all second lieutenants in my battalion and in the 82nd Airborne Division. By the time I made colonel, there was only 2 of us left.
Oh, wow.
Me and one other lieutenant. We had only 2 left in the Army. I was a brigade commander. The other guy was on the Army staff at the Pentagon, and he was a colonel too, but he was not selected for command. And the other 36 officers all got out somewhere along the line. They didn't make their career. And 17 of those were from West Point. So just because you go to one of the academies or you go, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stay. And so throughout my career, you see, and the higher you rank you get, the smaller it gets. So by the time I made colonel, I knew almost, it's a very small percentage of people at that age, especially when you become a commander. So you know so many of your peers that you see. But I would venture to say, most people don't say they're going to be a careerist when they first join. I think it takes a while. I really started thinking about staying at about the 8 and 10 year mark.
Oh, okay.
That's about where, for me, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to make this a career. And then after that, I was just committed.
Right. So is there a better way to do it? Because, you went in right out of high school and then got out and went back in. Is there a benefit if you're, would you say or recommend a certain track to take?
I think every officer should be an enlisted soldier first to understand what soldiers go through, but that's not a requirement. I think it helped me because I correlated because I was a young soldier. So I dealt with young soldiers better. At least that's what the feedback I got was. A lot of times if you go to an academy and you come straight in as an officer, you might have lost that. And a lot of them don't. I'm not going to say that, I served with a lot of great West Point officers, don't get me wrong. But if you've been a soldier and you've been that private, you understand what it's like to live in the barracks. You understand to deal with day-to-day life. A little better than if you did your 4 years at West Point, you're coming in as a second lieutenant. And you have no idea what it was like for them to go through that private through specialist to sergeant rank. And I went all the way through staff sergeant, got out, and then came back in as an officer. So for that standpoint, I think that was helpful for me. For most young men and women, if you can get into the academy, I would tell you get into the academy if you can. West Point is an amazing place. I visited several times while I was brigade commander. I would love to. I never thought about it because I was only committed to being infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division because that was what my grandfather did. So, funny story. When I took the ASVAB, which is the entrance exam test for the Army, this guy gave me a sheet of paper, and it was like, I don't know, I qualified for like 50 some jobs. And I said, hey, I only care about one. And he was reading to him. I said, stop. If I can't be an infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division, then I'm walking out of here today. The guy's like, well, that's a bad choice. This guy happened to be a military officer. And he was like, you live in the woods, it's nasty. And I said, that's my choice. Either you give me a contract that says infantry 82nd, or I'm not signing up. And he was super happy to give me that. So, but that's where I was at. And so, other people are different. They like to do high-tech things. I just gave advice to a young man up in Wyoming. Matter of fact, some friends of yours too, whose son is actually going to join, and he's going to look at flying UAVs because he loves the game. and gamers do great as being UAV pilots. So,
Mhm.
and the Army has a big track for that with these unmanned vehicles, aerial vehicles. So, I mean, it really what is best for them. I wouldn't say one's better than the other. I would tell them, whatever path they need to go on is the best for them.
Very good. And yeah, I agree with that. And it's interesting that you pretty much knew what you wanted to do, and if you weren't going to get it, then you were going to take a different route. So
I was going to take a different route.
So to kind of wrap things up, what makes your service and sacrifice worth it? What about our country? What about your service? What is it that makes that worth it?
I think it's still to this day the camaraderie I have with the men and women I serve with.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this morning I was flying from San Antonio back home to Pittsburgh, and I get texts. I actually have my phone here I'm talking to you on, and I was chatting with 3 to 4 sergeants who work for me who just all came out on the promotion list and were sending me a note thanking me for their mentorship that I gave them, because they're all now making master sergeant and sergeant majors. So it's that type of stuff. When I see that, the young officers who serve with me, now they're exceeding and they're becoming either battalion or brigade commanders, or my enlisted soldiers who are now becoming first sergeants, master sergeants, and sergeants major. That's what really means something to me, because it shows the lineage that we built in the time we were together.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely thank you for the legacy that you're leaving in our military, and your service and sacrifice, and what that's done for us who didn't serve and haven't served. I know we all have our roles, and some are to serve and some are not, but just wanted to make sure you understand how appreciative we are of your 29 years of service and of your time here today. Is there anything you would like to tell the participants as we wrap this up?
No, I would just like to tell them thanks for reaching out and taking care of vets. Anything you can do to help a vet is awesome. And, for me, I'm the same way. Whatever I can do, I don't care how I can do it. I literally on my way home from a wounded warrior hunt right now in Rock Springs, Texas. So anything you can do to support a vet, whether it's sitting down and talking to them, whether they were, Korean War, Vietnam vets, or Afghanistan, Iraq vets, it's just sitting down and talking to them and letting them know that somebody cares about them.
Absolutely. Well, Colonel Rich Menhard, we definitely thank you for your time today, and again for your 29 years of service. And thank you, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
What another remarkable interview. I hope that you, the viewer, were able to learn lots of lessons and a lot of cool stories. Again, we'd like to thank Colonel Rich Menhard for his service and taking time out of his day to conduct that interview. Special thank you to all the viewers who've just joined or have been watching for a while. Special thanks to Kristen Campbell for conducting that interview and all of her help for this event. The next and final interview will be in 5 minutes, and I can assure you it is an interview that you don't want to miss.
If you just want to go ahead and start by introducing yourself, what you did and what you do now, if that's fine, and then we'll get to the questions.
So I'm Beaver from number 15. I was a U.S. Army veteran from 2004. I joined in October 2004 and got out in April 2007. The lifer thing just wasn't for me, so I never re-upped, but I deployed from October 2006 to December of 2007, and then ETS in April 2008. And I was a Bradley Fighting Vehicle Systems maintainer, 63 Mike, with the A3 identifier. We went through training for all the brand new versions of the Bradley at the time. I don't even know what they're on now, but yeah.
So if it's okay with you, we'll just go over some military and general stuff, and then we can get to some Bradley specific stuff if you wouldn't mind talking about that, because Bradley seems pretty cool. Alrighty, so first question is going to be, what inspired you to serve? Did you have anybody in the military previously, family members, or was it just an education or just something to do once you got out of high school?
Yeah. Well, my grandpa was in the Navy toward the tail end of World War II, and my grandma was a Army recruiter. Shortly after World War II, like in late 40s, early 50s. My dad joined the Air Force. I think basically right out of high school, and ended up getting medically discharged for something with his knee. But not a lot of like lifelong people who did it, but just people who did serve. So when I was younger, I was bouncing around and didn't have a lot of discipline or anything. So I decided that I was just going to go ahead and join the military, and it was a pretty sure gig. They teach you everything, give you what you need, and then they pay you for it. I decided to go full-time active because I had nothing really better to do, rather than doing like National Guard or anything like that, because might as well consume my time to do it. So
yeah, sure.
And then joined up, but I knew basically right after, like right when I got to basic, I knew day one, this isn't for me life wise, but I'll do this and
stick it out for the contract. So was it the first? Isn't it first enlist is usually 3-4 years, right? Or they go in cycles, or
it just depends on your MOS.
Gotcha.
Certain MOSs you can get, particularly if you're doing active time. You can get a contract for lower times, but either way, it doesn't matter. Like whether you go active or whether you go reserves or whether you go National Guard, in any type of service, anytime you sign a contract with the U.S. government, you have an 8-year mandatory service obligation, period. So you're technically in for 8 years one way or the other. Now, I did all of my time, rather than spreading it out over the course of 8 years, doing 2 weekends a month, 1 week a year thing, like the reserves of the National Guard. I just did all my time active up front. So I had my basic and AIT training time was scheduled for 6 months, and my actual contract was for 3 years. So 3 years and 6 months. So I went from October of 04 to April of 08, and that was my ETS date. And they never really had a compelling offer for reenlistment, even while I was deployed. So I might have re-upped for the right amount of money, but it was a deal where I kind of knew what I was going to do when I got out. I had an idea, and I knew that I didn't really want to make a career out of it. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making a career out of it. I just didn't personally want to make the career out of it.
Okay, yeah, that seems yeah. I mean, I've heard that seems to be a good story. Is just to get up on your feet, hit the ground running if you aren't already. So whenever you joined, were you planning on being is there something you particularly wanted, infantry, mechanic, intelligence? Was there anything like that were you shooting for, or was just whatever the best option was, you were going to take it?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a mechanic. I wanted to get some I was really into cars as a kid and stuff, so I wanted to be a mechanic. Wanted to go to school to be a mechanic and whatnot, and so picking a mechanic MOS in the military just seemed like the logical step, and then get out and use the GI Bill and stuff like that to go to college and become a mechanic and whatnot. Of course, later in life, I do that, and I discover that there's not a whole lot of money to be made there. So
yeah, unfortunately. So on to the next question. What would you consider to be the biggest sacrifice that comes with serving in the military?
Your time. Single-handedly your time, especially if you're active duty. Like active duty, it seems like if you're going to sacrifice anything, it is your time, because it seems like it's a 9 to 5, right? It seems like it's your normal job. And and it is odd because you do get a lot of time, quote unquote, off, but at the same time, you're on call 24/7, 365 while you're on, right? They call you and they say, hey, we need you here. you're going. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no, oh, but I'm on leave, or oh, hey, I'm here, or whatever. And like they say, you show up here and you do it. Period.
Mhm.
That's how it works, and you know that's how it should work. But it is, you know, it's a sacrifice you have to make. So time wise is the big deal. You know, you'd be thinking you're going to get off at 5 or something, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that still needs done in the motor pool. You know, you're gearing up to deploy or something. You're staying there till 8, 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes you have guard duty or something. You have to sit, you know, in the motor pool overnight if need be, because there aren't locks or something, or you have to do a CQ duty at the barracks or something, or you have to sit there, you know, CQ's 24 hours. You're there for a full 24 hours the whole time.
Wow.
And then you get a day off afterward, or that's at least that's how we ran it. That's how it ran at our unit. So we did a 24-hour shift, and then you get a full day off afterward. But, you know, for signing in and out of the barracks and whatnot, but
yeah,
it's just,
yeah, time definitely
is what it is. It's the time sink. So
for sure. Our next question is going to be, what advice would you give anyone who is considering to joining the military? Is there anything that you would do differently if you could, that you would give advice to other people?
Well, like I said, I knew I wasn't going to be a lifer or whatever. I knew I wasn't going to re-up unless there was, you know, the right amount of money or some, you know, some incentive for me to do so. I don't regret my time in service. It was just, they taught me a lot of things that are extremely helpful, you know, in everyday life and being, they're just, it's a benefit. It's a net benefit to you no matter how it goes down. So I would definitely say never discount the idea of serving in the military, but at the same time, I wouldn't say go looking directly for it. You know, if that's what you're about, joining, I'm going to join the military and I'm going to serve in the military, then by all means, you know, go for it. I'm not going to tell you, no, don't do it or anything like that. But, you know, if it's something you're just kind of thinking about and you kind of half-heartedly looking into it, then, you know, definitely make sure you're taking a hard look at everything. Talk to people, people who've been in, particularly people who are in, if you can, and you know, make your decision based on good information. Don't just jump into it right off the bat. If you're, you know, not sure about it. I mean, if you're 100% sure, like I said, go for it. And then you can make it, you know, you can make a further decision later. But it's not something that is a decision that you take lightly. You have to really need to make sure that you're going to do this. This is what your plan is, and go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So piggybacking off of that, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your service? Anything that the military taught you, as far as, I guess, things that could help you with career paths or choosing civilian career paths or anything along that nature?
Discipline, time management, the ability to adapt and overcome situations. This is things that, you know, these are basic principles that you'll learn in the Army real quick. In any military, it doesn't particularly matter if it's the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, whatever. You're going to learn discipline. You're going to learn how to adapt and overcome situations and make the most of any given situation. So it's definitely like I said, it's definitely rewarding. You know, me personally, some of the stuff that I find, you know, that's most important to me as far as that is just just knowing that I'm I'm part of a group of people who makes up less than 1% of the country. And that's a massive amount of people, but, you know, because of the country is so big, you know, there's not a lot of people that do it. So yeah, it's a big, there's a big net benefit to your life. Regardless, you will learn. There is something for everybody. You know, I did TC3 training, which is basically, it's not like a combat medic, right? There's an MOS for combat medic, but I went through TC3 training, which is basically like first responder stuff. So, you know, in a medical situation where someone needs medical attention, I can provide that medical attention. I could even provide an IV if needed. I know how to do this stuff because this was stuff that was taught to me in the Army, and that's stuff that can apply anytime there's some sort of medical problem even in the real world. So,
yep, for sure. Yeah, it definitely seems there's definitely a lot to learn in the military, especially in just a short time or a long time. And so, I guess, or going to the opposite of that question, what was the most challenging part about your service? Was it time or was it something else?
Yeah, it was definitely time for me. You're up at, before 6 o'clock in the morning. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. And I don't know if people realize this, but Fort Hood, Texas is the largest military installation on the face of the planet. It's massive. Yeah. It is absolutely huge. As far as land mass is concerned, you take into account all the training area and stuff. It's the biggest military installation out there. And housing 2 divisions of Army units, not like brigades or whatever, 2 full divisions of Army unit on the base. If you live off base and you're trying to get on base in the morning for PT, along with, 300,000 other people who are all trying to get on base, you have to get up real early and you got to get headed in real early if you're going to make it to PT on time. So, when I got married and moved off base, that was a big thing. And I'm not a morning person. So getting up in the morning for me was the problem. I have a problem where I don't wake up so easy and I have a hard time falling asleep. So it's, that was probably the biggest personal challenge that I had. Now, some people don't have that problem at all. Some people are just naturally able to get up and do stuff. But yeah, that was probably the hardest thing for me personally to overcome, was to have to, force myself to get up every morning and get up and, make sure I'm shaved and make sure that I have all the right PT gear that we need for the morning and everything, and make sure that I'm there on time and whatnot, which is, that was something that I struggled with in my early life. And so it was a struggle throughout that and making sure that I'm on time for everything. But, something that gets beat into you pretty quick. Not literally, but
yeah, for sure. That seems to be a common theme around, is time and discipline and making sure everything's set, because, it could, like you said, it could be 9 to 5 certain days, but other days, it's, you only go home and you only come in whenever the job's done. So that job could, take one day, it could take multiple. So that definitely seems like a common theme. So our next question is, what is your hope for the future of our military and our country, being over in foreign soil and having experience there?
I don't have a lot of opinions really about foreign policy. If we need to go in and do something or whatever, then we need to go in and do it. And our guys are going to do it, and we'll do it well. That's just the way, the U.S. Army operates and the U.S. military operates. But I think that, people, like recently Trump, not to be political or anything, but recently Trump has been doing all these troop pullbacks, and I think that's probably a good thing. I don't know that, everything that we were told going into Iraq or Afghanistan or anything was 100% accurate, obviously. So, we really probably should be getting out of there. Now, some people will say otherwise, but a lot of times, while I was over there, a lot of the people that we interacted with were happy that we were there and we were helping out. But at the same time, there were a lot of people that were fairly indifferent and just kind of wished we would just leave them alone. And I understand that. I can understand as an American. I can understand just leave us alone and let us do our thing. So, there's a give and take and a cost benefit analysis that all have to be done and whatnot. And, as far as that's concerned, we'll do what we have to do, but hopefully we don't have to go into, any country. I don't want to have to go anywhere else, but
yeah,
you do what you got to do. So,
yep.
And you do what you're told.
Yep, definitely. So now that we're done, that's about all for general military specific questions. So now, if it's okay with you, we're going to go and get into the Bradley, or I think the Bradley at some point morphed into the linebacker. So did you work on the M2 or M3 Bradley?
So I worked on the M2 and the M3 are essentially the same. The only difference is one's technically a Cav and one's meant more for Cav Scouts, one's meant more for infantry base. It's more of like a troop transport. The only difference really is in the back, there's in the back of the Bradley, when you lower the ramp on the M2, you'll have a row of seating on the left-hand side for Cav Scouts. And then on the right-hand side, there'll just be additional storage for additional tow missiles and ammo and gear and stuff for the scouts, whereas in the infantry base version, the M3 is going to have 2 rows of seating on either side. So it's more of a troop transport.
Gotcha.
With more of a troop transport with a turret rather than an actual vehicle with a
less of a anti-armor kind of.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I worked on both. I was in first Cav. So, but we had both versions. Depending, we only had so many of the M3s. We definitely had more of the M2s, but yeah, that was basically what I worked on the whole time.
Okay. So off of that, is there anything particularly interesting or surprising about the Bradley that really interested you at first? Anything that was particular challenge or that you thought was cool, at least compared to other armored vehicles in the Army?
As far as like why I picked it or something, not particularly. It wasn't like, it's not particularly impressive in any particular way, just looking at it or seeing what it does. I mean, it does some cool things. It's one of the few amphibious tanks that, or I shouldn't say tanks, but track vehicles that we have. As it is able to technically float. There's like if you install on the side skirting, there's like a flotation system that you can activate. And so the thing can actually be buoyant and float. And the way that the tracks are designed, the track itself is built to be a paddle so that it can, not only can it obviously, roll around on the ground, but it can then paddle and move the vehicle in water. So it's truly amphibious. But other than that, not anything in particular drove me to the Bradley. But then when I got in and started, looking at some of the stuff, there's definitely some cool things that I found out about the Bradley. And then when we were introduced to the A3 Bradley, which was the much more updated version of the Bradley, when we first got into AIT, we were working on the A2 Bradley, which is much more analog, a lot more mechanical systems, and less electronic controller. Everything was much more rudimentary. But the A3s, once we were introduced to those, and we had all the cool electronic gadgets, the A3 has the commander's. We call it the tombstone, but it was basically just a sight mechanism that the commander could use independent of the turret to spot targets and things like that. So the A3 Bradley was definitely really cool once I saw that, and I wanted to get trained on the A3s particularly because in the basic just AIT, all we did was the A2s, which, like I said, was a lot more analog, a lot more mechanical. To put it bluntly, a lot more of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
diagnostically speaking, even like the A3 Bradley, because it had so many. It was so much more updated. It actually had like onboard diagnostic systems built in, so we could go in and we wouldn't even have to necessarily plug anything into it to try and figure out what's wrong. We could get we could get code indications and fault codes from the Bradley itself.
Oh wow!
And then track it down from there. So diagnosing the thing was a lot easier and a lot faster.
Yeah, for sure. So in I guess, was there any point in time where the Bradleys had any issues with IEDs? Was that a common theme, or were they generally protected from IEDs? Because that seemed to be at least a big problem with Humvees at the time. Was they weren't very protected, at least on the underside, from IEDs. So did Bradleys have a little bit more protection, or was there still smaller issues with IEDs and RPGs and other light anti-tank stuff?
Well, RPGs weren't as big of a factor, especially for the Bradley, as we used what's called a reactive armor plating. It's on the outside of the Bradley, you have armor plating that goes across it, and then what mounted to the armor plating are these they're like tracks that get mounted, basically. That carry these reactive armor plating. And what the reactive armor plating essentially is about a 6-inch thick by 8-inch wide by 10-inch tall C4 block that gets set off via heat and pressure. So if an RPG were to hit it, the heat and pressure from the RPG itself would actually detonate the reactive armor and then use that percussive force to propel any kind of projectile or shrapnel away from the vehicle itself.
Wow.
Because they were starting to use, we were getting reports they were using like Sabo, Sabo-like ammunition in RPGs where it would punch through the armor that way, and so the reactive armor was used as a deterrent from that. So the RPG would come in, it would contact that reactive armor, and that would detonate and take the Sabo and any additional shrapnel and just blow it away from the vehicle. And that worked really well. And we never had any guys that I'm aware of actually have any reactive armor detonated, but we'd heard reports of it, and everybody who had been hit by anything like that was fine. Our Bradleys went through when they went through Baghdad, had an extra, I want to say like an extra 1/4-inch thick armor plate attached to the front that bent around. It was like a flat plate on the bottom, and then it bent up to meet the angle of the hull coming up in the front. That was attached, but IEDs were a big problem all the way through. We had IEDs would get hit and knock road wheels off, break track. We had one that got hit, and this was my close call. We had one that got hit while it was sitting out in on a basically just holding guard. We had a post outside of our normal fob that we would rotate people out to, and they were sitting outside of that, basically holding guard. And then IED went off, and we got out there, and no one was hurt or anything, so everybody was fine. But it knocked a bunch of the reactive armor, the explosive force knocked a bunch of the reactive armor up and off the vehicle, and it even knocked this big armor plate on the front off the vehicle. So we had to pick all that stuff up, and it did something to the transmission. We had to tow the thing back. And so we get the thing all ready to get towed up. We're getting ready to move it, and there's this giant armor plate. We have to figure out what we're going to do with it. And I mean, the thing is dumb heavy. So it was like, we didn't want to mess around with trying to drag it over and like lift it and put it on the back of the 88 with the crane or anything. So we just chained it up to basically to the back of the Bradley and just drug it along. Well, as we started doing that, it was basically digging into the ground. And as we moved maybe 20 feet, and everybody was like, stop. And they found a propane tank that was dug and buried in the ground that we were essentially sitting right on top of, and apparently never went off. And so our guys went out and did a controlled detonation on it, but we were sitting basically right on top of the thing. And that was my close call with an IED. But we had other guys that would get, that we had one that got hit, and it pushed the bottom of the hole, bent the whole thing up, and we're talking 8-10 inches thick of aluminum magnesium compound oil or compound armor, and it pushed it up and bent the whole like motor mount system and everything from the Bradley. And so the thing wasn't drivable forever until our FSR, our field service representative from BAE Systems, Clint, once he showed up on site, he actually built a fire. He took this whole thing, this whole Brad, basically jacked it up on road wheels, built this huge fire underneath the hole, and heated the hole up, and built this jig to mount to the top of the engine bay that he could push the hole down with. And he actually pushed this whole thing down. We got a whole new power pack and put everything in it and rebuilt this thing basically from completely blown up status to completely operational again, which was pretty cool. It took a while. That one was down for a long time, but and of course we did have one that got hit with like a double stacked anti-tank mine that literally just ripped through the armor of the back of the Bradley, and it did kill a guy. But so yeah, IEs were a problem. It was just, it wasn't as big an issue with the Bradleys as it was for things like the Humvees or the 113s. But it was still a problem, and we were actually a little worried because we were being replaced by a Striker unit, and the Striker's even more lightly armed than we are now. They're faster too, so there's something to that. But we were a little worried because our Bradleys were getting messed up pretty good.
Oh, yeah, those are definitely some interesting and cool stories, to be fair, especially the one repairing that Bradley. So that was
Clint's no joke. This dude was a deep Southern guy. I mean, he had the thickest accent you ever heard. You couldn't understand him if he didn't have a dip in his mouth. Like, I mean, straight up, like redneck old boy. And this dude was no joke. Like, if you had to fix it, he could fix it. And he wasn't like one of those guys that it's just like all mechanical skill either. Like, it was electronics and stuff too. Like the A3s, he knew how to make those things work and how to read the diagnostic information to a level that no one could. I mean, it was insane. He's the best, the best mechanic I've ever seen. The guy was awesome.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, that looks about at least all the time I have. So do you have any closing remarks, any comments to tournament participants or anything like that? Anything you would like to close out with?
Just good luck to any of the participants in the tournament. Remember any training you've received and make sure you employ that as best you can. And thanks for the interview, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. I mean, thank you for your time and thank you for your service. I definitely got a lot of cool stories out of this and a lot of interesting stuff. So I hope other people will do too. So again, thank you so much, man.
No problem.
And I'll see you later.
All right, take it easy, man.
All right. You too, man. See ya.
Yep, take it easy.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last interview, and it certainly did not disappoint. It is very cool to hear all the stories about the Bradley and his experience in the military. With that, I would like to give thanks to all of our veterans who took time out of their day to be interviewed. We thank them dearly for their service because our country would not be what it is without people like them. Very special thanks to our Because of You I Can founder, Kristen Campbell. She played a pivotal role in organizing the interviews and the event. Thank you very much for the major role you played. Thanks to the DCS Tactical Air Command for helping me advertise and organize this tournament. Lastly, thanks to the viewers who turned in throughout the stream. The donation link to Because of You I Can will be in the description below. This stream will now be restarting with the interviews.